Oh, for the love of God, I was supposed to get robbed tomorrow! Damn it! Well, my evening opened up. What am I gonna do now? I can't go, hey all, Scott here. I don't own Lasagna World Tour. False alarm. I lost everything. Well, except what the robber decided to leave. I wonder why. This is too convenient. You know what I really need to do is buy a $500 console alongside a $2,000 TV set, buy a $60 controller to play this free game for $60. Oh, fucking brilliant!
Error. Take it, you son of a bitch.
I'm not one to make bad decisions. I'm one to buy a 9th Wii U. So the idea of a person paying full price for a game you can get for $1 or free, I don't even think God planned that one out. Listen, gaming is bigger than it's ever been before, and I think a key part of that massive growth is mobile gaming. Playing games on your smartphone. It counts. I mean, based on how much playtime occurs, I think my mom is a bigger gamer than I am based on Scrabble alone, yet I'm the loser. I feel like core home console gaming and mobile gaming, however, are a bit too different. There's different design philosophies at play, and mobile games are all created to be played via just a touchscreen. So while I appreciate that mobile gaming has broadened the video game landscape and do enjoy a few smartphone titles here and there, I think home consoles and mobile work best when separated. Trailblazer. Every so often, game companies figure that because mobile games do so well, that must mean they should only make mobile games from there on out, or incorporate elements of them into their console games, or say AAA gaming is dying. All because Grandpa bought the Bird app for $1. Oh my God, the console game industry keeps flip-flopping between accepting what it is and trying to embrace mobile. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it works out, but most of the time it's like, hey, we're gonna put this game on mobile just because mobile is huge, even though it would do 10 times better on console because that's where the target demographic is. I'm not mad about it, I'm just really fucking angry. But what about the inverse of that? What about taking a popular mobile game and putting it on a console? Whoever thought of that should get a Nobel Prize. In hell. Listen, I have a soft spot in my heart for, I don't know what else to call it, the golden age of mobile games. That period of time when the iPhone first opened its app store, come on, everybody remembers those commercials saying how there's an app for everything. When you get an Apple device with the app store available on it, man, I'd just scroll through that thing for hours, finding all kinds of fun free apps, or I'd scrounge up enough money to spend $1 on one. Oh, the quality was horrendous for many of these apps, but it was a fun era. There was this feeling that smartphone apps could do anything. I downloaded apps that said they were universal TV remotes without any knowledge on how they'd work. They never did. Then there were the one-time gimmick apps like, ooh, a lighter. Nowadays, apps all kind of feel the same, and games are mostly free, which is cool, but they're all littered with ads. You can't do anything without a 30-second unskippable commercial blocking your way. And many of the most popular games, they all blend in. Back in 2009 or so, the most popular iPhone games were more unique. They were experiences designed specifically for the phone, and I feel like that contributed heavily to their popularity. Angry Birds was the biggest phenomenon, though it was never a favorite of mine. It was fun, addictive, and worked perfectly with a touchscreen-only device. Stretch a bird, political violence. The game originally cost 99 cents on the iPhone, $1.99 on the iPad, and there were a few releases in the series. You had the original vanilla Angry Birds Seasons, which gave you constant updates at new levels based on holidays and the time of year, and Angry Birds Rio. You know, they made a movie based on this game. I never considered this to be a trilogy, more so just variations of the original Angry Birds, but it doesn't matter because Activision did. Angry Birds Trilogy. For only $40, you can waste 37. Yeah, physical releases of the first 3 games for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and Nintendo 3DS. Strangely, Wii U, and PlayStation Vita versions came a year later, considering these were platforms that honestly worked better for Angry Birds with touchscreens and pointer controls. The main selling point of Angry Birds Trilogy is to play it on a TV. Was it worth it? No. Don't get me wrong, I see value in playing this game on the TV. You know, pass the controller around, try to beat each other's high scores, but it's just so clunky here. What used to be a game with the simplest control method imaginable now uses literally every face button on the controller. That is impressive. I'd say the Wii and Wii U versions make the most sense. This release is nice as it does preserve 3 of the biggest mobile games ever, some of which have been delisted and discontinued from the app stores. Yeah, I'll give this release that. It keeps the Angry Birds Rio dream alive. But no matter what, I can't look past the fact that while this is a collection of games, it's a collection of games that retail for $3 total, $6 max buying the iPad versions. In fact, Trilogy was missing some levels from the original game. Some exclusive bonus levels are included, but does that really matter with Angry Birds? It's not like these levels are vastly different enough to make you think, wow, new level designs? You don't really care about the design itself. The fun of new levels in Angry Birds is the idea you have a new box to check off. Ooh, a new stage to be and get 3 stars in? Do you really have a favorite stage in the game? Can you tell the difference between ears of corn? Because if you give me a bonus ear of corn, I'm not gonna be like, oh my god, a new corn? No, it's just, okay, it's just another ear of corn for me to eat. The bonus stages in Angry Birds Trilogy. It's a fine release. I mean, the Angry Birds series are solid games. It would have been cool to get games made specifically for consoles rather than just the mobile games all over again, and the initial price point of $40, no matter who you were, was hard to swallow. So Activision listened, and they knew a trilogy of games wasn't enough for that price point. They charged more for one. Angry Birds Star Wars for $50, released 1 year later for pretty much every console at the time. I feel like they wanted to push to be there for the PS4 and Xbox One's launch, and they knew they could go consumers into buying into it.
But the birds will be pissed.
The fact they pretty much sold a single $1 mobile game for $50 when at the very least they could have included Angry Birds Star Wars 2 in the package, considering that came out a few months prior to this console release. I'll throw Angry Birds Space in there. It's pretty dumb. Like, who the hell would buy this? Ignore that question, but disregarding all of that, Angry Birds Star Wars does offer family fun for less than most AAA games. Multiplayer is now included, which adds so much value to the game, even though it's literally just passing the controller to the other player for their turn, which you never needed a multiplayer mode to do that before, but it's a fantastic addition to a solid game. That's how some reviews of this read, and I don't get it. To be fair, I think most saw this as ridiculous, and if it actually sold well, I think we would have seen far more physical Angry Birds releases by now. They were always banking on these games luring in parents that know nothing but their kid likes Angry Birds and maybe their kid's name, all without realizing you'd spend $90 on both releases when these would all cost you $4 on the App Store. But then again, it's good to know these games will forever be preserved via these physical methods.
I'm sleeping well tonight!
Alright, enough about the pissy chicken saga. Let's talk about the best mobile game. Cut the Rope hit the scene around the same time as Angry Birds, and I always preferred it. A very simple yet engaging puzzle game. Nab all 3 collectible stars by cutting the ropes, holding the candy to get it to the monster Om Nom's mouth. You know, a bunch of 9-year-olds see this game and go, oh, my childhood! But no, guys, let's give Cut the Rope more credit. I mean, I think this is so much better than Angry Birds. It's so smartly designed, and unlike that game, I remember so many of these levels. The gimmicks they employ, the sound effects, music, the visuals, and animation are phenomenal for a mobile game released in 2010. Hell, even in general, they're fantastic. And the fact this game could not work as well without a touchscreen, it just makes this one of my top mobile games of all time. If this was never a mobile game and was just a DS game published by Nintendo, you would all eat it up. Every one of ya. But you know the old saying, if it's good, make it bad. Cut the Rope launched on the Nintendo DSi shop channel in September of 2011. I should know, I bought it back then. I think you could all tell. I don't know, I knew I liked Cut the Rope on my iPod Touch and I wanted it on my DSi at the time, or Nintendo 3DS to be more exact. It is a pixelated, choppy as hell, dumbed down version of Cut the Rope. But it still Cut the Rope. They translated it over to the DS as well as they could, honestly. Going for the horizontal book style, it works well enough, albeit there's no reason to play this if you already had an iPhone or iPod Touch at the time. I think one of the reasons I picked this up was due to the lack of software on 3DS at the time, so I went, yeah, sure, this'll aid in my buyer's remorse. But of course, I could tell this was a heavily watered down port. I kinda wondered, why didn't they just make Cut the Rope for the 3DS entirely? Well, it's my lucky day 8 years ago. In 2013, we got Cut the Rope Triple Treat, a physical 3DS game. I thought this was an entirely new Cut the Rope game made specifically for the 3DS. Triple Treat is like Angry Birds Trilogy, 3 Cut the Rope mobile games converted to a video game system, in this case, the 3DS. The back screenshots have these 3D models of Om Nom, and I thought like, okay, that must be a new bonus side game or something. Each game is played on the bottom touchscreen, with the top being a completely superfluous 3D model of Om Nom. When it gets the candy on the bottom screen, it gets it on the top, so it's sort of like the top screen is an extreme close-up, though it's delayed enough to not make for a cool effect. This isn't a bad game by a long shot. It runs much better than the DSi version, plus you get 2 other games, a collection of promotional animations, leaderboards. I really do think Cut the Rope is a good puzzle game, but playing on the 3DS doesn't benefit the experience at all. If anything, it's worse due to the lesser touchscreen. For $30 at launch, again, it's a bit much. It's not like you wouldn't get $30 of use out of this thing. I mean, the back of the box boasts over 50 hours of gameplay. Yeah, I got 4 years out of my $10 box cutter. Does that make it worth $900? Sticking to the 3DS, let's try out Doodle Jump Adventures, also released in 2013 alongside a DS version, Doodle Jump Journey plus plus Doodle Jump for Kinect for Xbox 360. Jesus, that was a big year for this stuff. Did everybody collectively go, let's make worse versions of our mobile games and charge 30 times more? Minds think alike. Doodle Jump is an endurance test. Tilt your device and see how high you can go. There's not much to it. This is one of those games you see all these adaptations and merch of because companies see it as a big phenomenon, when I think it did well because it was a simple game on the App Store during a time when people would download damn near anything if it was free. So of course it got a 3DS game and a Hot Topic t-shirt. Yeah, it's Doodle Jump, now taking place across 2 screens, which honest to God is kind of disorienting. Adventures refers to the campaign, which are literally just Doodle Jump stages with definitive ends, and that's it. Move on to the next one, basically the same thing. Is Doodle Jump Adventures worth it? Let's be fair though, sometimes the transition to consoles can go quite smoothly. Here we have Fruit Ninja Connect. Oh, he's not a ninja, he's a fruit ninja.
Oh, badass.
This is one of the best conversion ideas. Fruit Ninja was all about swiping combos of fruit while avoiding missing any and bombs, but Kinect for Xbox 360 gives you the exact game, but you use your body now, karate chopping the fruit away. It's honestly one of the best uses for Kinect, and is truly distinctive enough from the mobile release to be completely warranted here. Fruit Ninja for PlayStation Vita is literally the exact same thing as the iPhone release at the time, so bravo, it was a flawless conversion. But why do this in the first place? Oh. So, it's the exact same game, downloadable only, no new control options, featured anything, for $8. At least with Angry Birds Trilogy and Star Wars, you had the excuse of them being on home consoles for the first time. Wait, actually, Angry Birds was made available on the PS3 and PSP stores separately as early as 2011. Almost seems like there was a push by Sony to have some popular mobile games on the PS3 because around this time, Jetpack Joyride hit the system. While overpriced and offering nothing new, these versions I think feel pretty genuine as downloadable games from this era. The same goes for Flight Control, which released on DSiWare, WiiWare, and PlayStation 3, only in Europe and Japan for some reason. No market for it in the US. In Europe, they won't shut the f up about it. Games like Pac-Man 256 released on PS4 and Xbox One after the mobile version without any microtransactions or advertisements, with controller support for just one low price, which this game works great in both contexts. As a quick pick up and play mobile game and as a fun content complete downloadable console release. It proves there's genuinely really quality stuff on mobile, stuff that can work just as great on consoles as well. Gameloft is the leading supplier of mobile games. They've always been that, just a D-grade Ubisoft clone who pumps out unoriginal, uninspired mobile ripoffs of more popular console games. A lot of their games aren't horrible or anything, but they're just nothing sacks of not. And their premier series has always been Asphalt, basically your mobile phone alternative to Need for Speed. This is a long-running series, but who gives a shit? The original Asphalt Urban GT and Urban GT2 released on Nintendo DS actually before cell phones, so starting with Asphalt 3, it became a completely mobile-focused series. The games like Asphalt 4 hit the Nintendo DSi shop, and Asphalt 6 the Nintendo 3DS as a launch title. Asphalt 3D. This was one of the first 3DS games I bought, mainly because it was the only game I could afford after already picking up Pilotwings Resort. After reading Oedipus Rex, I said I too should have a tragic ending. I remember not having any opinions on this game, and frankly, that's how I feel about this entire series. It's such a soulless car game. There's nothing unique about it. It gets the job done. Like if you have a pheromone release when you see a car move, sure. But Ridge Racer 3D launched right alongside the 3DS too, so it's like, why not go for that one? I'll tell you why, because Asphalt is always cheap or free. That's how they get you. Asphalt 9 was a mobile game converted to the Nintendo Switch, and it's more of the same, but this time it's free to play. Again, it's playable, it works, it does the job, but there's something about these games that always makes me feel like I'm wasting my time playing them. And I just beat Ride to Hell Retribution. Now why does Gameloft bring these games to consoles? Well, it's usually if they think they can fill a certain void. Case in point, Modern Combat Blackout on Nintendo Switch. This series is to Call of Duty what Asphalt is to Need for Speed. Who the hell likes this series? Put your damn hands down! If you want a Call of Duty-like experience on your smartphone, here you go. Call of Duty. Even the title is just a ripoff of Modern Warfare. And again, the games, they're fine, but they review surprisingly well. And I think that is entirely due to the fact that they're good for mobile games. But then when they brought it to Nintendo Switch, the cracks start to show with games like this in Asphalt when you put them on an actual console, and the only reason they put Modern Combat on the Nintendo Switch was due to the lack of Call of Duty. There was no legitimate game from the series on the platform at the time, and people wanted a first-person shooter experience like that to play. Gameloft saw the opportunity and quickly put a mobile game from 2014 on the system for $20. Take notes, Sophocles. It's not great, in fact, it feels pretty pathetic. I wish they'd put more effort into redesigning the menus of these mobile games when converting them to console. It's just so painfully obvious when something was designed for a touchscreen. And even the controls, while functional, I feel like they were designed to mimic regular FPS controls, but compensating for the clunkiness of the touchscreen, but then letting you use a controller for it. It's so hard to explain, I don't even know what I'm talking about! Unfortunately, many developers just port over mobile games to the Nintendo Switch, and it's always this really underwhelming feeling when it happens. The system was marketed as a home console, and I'll always see it as that. But when a great handful of games are just mobile ports, there's nothing special feeling about that. Being able to play a mobile game on Switch gives me no joy. There's no feeling of, look at what I'm doing, ma. To which he says, Scott, I don't care you're playing Shinsekai Into the Depths on Switch that's been on iPhone for a year. Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition was a mobile conversion of Final Fantasy 15, and instead of the actual Final Fantasy 15 on Nintendo Switch, we got this version, and I'm sad. There's nothing special about any of this, especially if these versions are replacing getting the traditional edition of the game. Then it's more of a slap in the face compared to not getting any version at all. Football Manager Touch, yeah, the stripped down mobile version of Football Manager. Xbox got a version made specifically for it, titled Xbox Edition. The Nintendo Switch, they're not even trying to hide it. And then the Pokemon spin-offs. There's a ton that release simultaneously on mobile and Switch, and they either feel out of place on mobile or out of place on Switch. And now to be fair, they normally launch on Switch first, but you can't fool me. Games like Pokemon Quest and Pokemon Cafe Mix were designed for mobile first. Just look at them. It's unfortunate because we used to get so many Pokemon spin-offs of all kinds for the Game Boy Advance, DS, Nintendo 64, GameCube, Wii, and now, while we still get some big boy spin-offs, a lot of Pokemon spin-offs are relegated to being free-to-play mobile games that get a half-ass Switch version to throw us a bone. But in reality, I think this just opens these games up to more criticism. Again, look at the differences between the review scores of Modern Combat on mobile and Modern Combat on Switch. You become a lot more critical when you play a mobile game on a console like this. But that's just a testament to how big mobile has become. It's impossible to ignore, and a franchise like Pokemon makes perfect sense for the platform. Mobile franchises become so big that we end up getting things like Puzzle and Dragons Super Mario Bros. Edition. Yeah, a mobile game turned 3DS game with an official Nintendo license on it all. I have no idea if I like how this game looks or not. Well, something like this is far more understandable becoming a retail game, especially considering it was made from the ground up for the console. Like VR spin-offs or stuff like the Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare series. Plants vs. Zombies wasn't a mobile game first, but it hit the platform way before consoles, and Plants vs. Zombies 2 is only a mobile game. I'll count it. To be honest, most versions of this game work fairly well. The touchscreen of the Nintendo DS, the version for Xbox 360 was very fine-tuned. It feels great here, but the third-person shooter spin-off, well, that does make a bit more sense for the system. But hey, what if mobile games had their own dedicated system? No. Nuh-uh. Fucking Christ, yes. Take me back to 2013, when every company was making microconsoles literally only capable of streaming Netflix, and even then, some of them couldn't do that. These $100 systems were based on mobile operating systems, so they'd have some mobile games retooled to work on a TV, and in their marketing, they basically said, who needs a PS4 when you can play Crossy Road on this $99 back scratcher? Again, it can't even do that. Here's the thing, I think many companies don't understand what makes mobile games successful, and just think, oh, that means everybody loves this, put it everywhere. Listen, man, I play Flappy Dunk on my iPhone all the time, but it's more of a nervous tick than a, oh, I love this game. I just want something to do with my fingers, stimulate my eyes for a brief moment. Does that mean I'm a big fan? No, it just means I have more to work on mentally than I thought. When Flappy Bird was the biggest sensation for no other reason than it was a bitch hard, and all the high school students and coworkers were saying, hey, I got 4 points in Flappy Bird. No, I got 10. The developer removed it from the App Store afterwards, and when Amazon got the exclusive sequel, Flappy Bird's Family, for the Amazon Fire TV, who really gave a shit? Mobile games are so much less engrossing than normal console releases. I play mobile games very infrequently, but when I do, I'm not super into them. I know they're just for quick distractions, even if they're legitimately well-designed experiences. So banking on popular mobile games to sell well in any context doesn't really work. Just because these games did well on mobile, it doesn't mean they'll elicit the same reactions on consoles. But that also holds true for console games making the jump to mobile as well. So how about if they jump back? Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. All the PlayStation 2 Grand Theft Autos were remade for mobile devices. Let me tell you, I bought Grand Theft Auto 3 immediately when that released on iPhone in 2011. I mean, that was a dream come true to be able to play a PlayStation 2 game on the go. And it 100% was that, but it just didn't feel right played on a touchscreen. Like an idiot, I proceeded to buy every Grand Theft Auto that released on mobile afterwards and always had the same reaction. But San Andreas has always been my favorite of the series, and shortly after the mobile release, a new version for Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 launched, which was the mobile version. What the hell was this? I guess they wanted to do a remaster of San Andreas and just figured the mobile version was good enough, but like I said, when you do a mobile to console conversion, at least change the menus. It's so obvious when menus were designed for mobile. This just doesn't feel right. You converted a game that used the controller to work with the touchscreen, but then converted that version back to work with just the controller. I don't know why, it just feels weird. And on top of that, it's just not a good version. There's so many bugs and glitches and the game crashes constantly. It just doesn't work well. I have no idea why they even made this. It came out after the Xbox One and PS4 for the PS3 and Xbox 360. They only remastered San Andreas and not the other games from that generation, which also got mobile ports, so this gets the same reaction nearly all these other games got from me. Why the f***? Most mobile to console conversions inherently feel lazy, and that's just the stigma with most mobile releases. They're always seen as lesser than console ones, and sometimes they are, but sometimes they aren't. And hey, what else was I gonna do at the apartment today? Take a bath? The rumors are true. I was robbed, but if today taught me anything, it's that no matter how bad your day gets, you're doing better than the guy that bought this. Hey y'all, Scott here. I need a bath. Good timing, I haven't had one yet this year. Problem is, I only do what Space Invaders does. My diet is beyond limited. Lucky for the bath fan inside of me, I have no excuse. See, marketers have discovered there's no Venn diagram between bath fans and gamers. It's just a circle. It was inevitable. Mankind knew things were heading this way ever since air was invented. Xbox shampoo. Technically, you can use it on your body and face as well, so it is multi-purpose. I think a better term for it is Xbox skin jelly. I assume the audience for this is people who have never bathed before, but love Xbox, and according to my research, I just can't see them existing. You know, there were a couple of other products a part of this Xbox grooming line, all exclusive to Australia. I forgot. So we've got this Space Invader soap, so we already know I'm gonna smell fucking delicious, but I can use these in the shower, not just a bath, so I'll introduce some bath exclusives. I just prefer them. With a bath, you have a moment to say hi to whoever walked in. The Mario Bath Time Golf Set. No shower instructions are included. See, this does satiate one of my primal urges. God, I wanna play fucking golf. Not only do we get golf tools, but Mario Body Wash is included. But what if I don't give a shit about Luigi in the tub? Well, we've got the Sonic Bath Bubbles bath game. See, I was on the fence about bathing, but now I don't think you could pay me to leave. This is a bathtub. I bought this one at the convention. I mainly used it to store my soap, but I never had a chance to use my soap because I never had a place to bathe. That changed today. Man, this bathtub could be more comfortable. Could use some hay. Let's start with the Xbox shampoo, coming to us from Lynx, after I try my Beats headphone soup. It's the Xbox staple green, which makes me happy there's no Nintendo Switch variant. Basically, it allows Xbox on your head like never before. At the end of the day, solid shampoo, no real downsides outside of hair loss. Avoid contact with eyes.
What's your stance on lips?
Well, let's clean up all this soap. So I got soap here. Space Invaders soap. Huh. I played Space Invaders.
I gotta bathe.
If skin irritation persists, consult your doctor. Oh no, I know how it works. You lure me in with skin irritation just to end up diagnosing me with cancer. Just let a bather bathe. There's lots of gaming themed soaps. I've seen game cartridge themed bars which look damn near identical to the actual products. That's good. I am most critical in the shower. The Space Invader soap is neat, but only for that brief moment before you use it. Like what, you mean you don't want to rub this on your ass? Also, the outline isn't even a part of the soap. What is this? This isn't soap, it's a shape! Okay, I need to calm down. Maybe a relaxing Bath Bubbles bath game will ease the soap rant, because I can go all goddamn day. This Sonic the Hedgehog bath game is based on Sonic Adventure and involves trying to get these rings on the pegs. I had a couple of these water-based handheld games as a kid, but from what I remember, they never lasted. They always stopped working a while in, whether that was because of water leaking or God making sure we always have something to go to war over. I don't know, but I can tell the last owner had fun with it. The entire bag has been peeled off. Well, I can't be too clean in the tub. I've waited long enough. For the first 3 years of my life, I couldn't play Bath Time Golf Set. Back then, I even tried to get the cashier to card me while buying it. I am feeling pretty underage today. But now that I'm 24, I can finally responsibly use this. Set up the putting greens, hit the ball in. It's downhill from here. Yeah, what's your return policy? No, I got the hole-in-one. I don't need the tub anymore. In the end, I don't really need baths. Did you know using body spray eliminates your need for showers? Alright, to-do list for the week. I got robbed, I took a bath, now go on Wikipedia. You know, it's pretty hard to go, hey y'all, Scott here, here's a Wii U, when you just got robbed of everything that you hold dear. So, Why not? Let's take a look at the game consoles that were held the most dear to the most people based on their sales. Of course, you may go, Sky, you were just robbed of everything. How do you have consoles to talk about? See, that's where you're wrong. I plan ahead of time. I have theft-proof items. I just spit on them a lot. That usually does the trick. My game console's still better than yours. Just look at my resume. See, there's a major difference between a video game player and a video game talker. Guess which one I am. What was I just doing? It's fine. I can go without talking about video games. I can just play them and everybody's happy.
Wario.
See, our type has to care about how well a video game company is doing. It's like rooting for your favorite sports team if you didn't even watch them play. I didn't buy Bravely Default 2. Gosh, I sure hope it does well. It just makes you feel good seeing the company that makes your favorite game system doing well. Like, man, there's gotta be some overworked employees in there. It's also just interesting to analyze those sales numbers. Why are they going up? Why aren't they going up? Why don't I play video games instead of talking about how much they sold and why you should care? How about this? Let's take a look at the 14 best-selling consoles of all time. If I don't convert you to a video game talker by the end, I'll officially play a video game. There's a lot writing on this. Of course, let's remove consoles that are still being actively sold, so anything post-2017, because those numbers will forever be changing. I always looked at that best-selling video game consoles of all time page on Wikipedia back when I was a kid. It was cool to see what was the most popular and think about why that might be. Why did this console sell so well, or not as much as it could have? If we actually figure it out, who knows? Maybe we can more easily predict what will happen in the video game industry. The SNES being in number 14, see what I can amount to? The Super Nintendo Entertainment System sold just over 49 million units.
What a little bitch.
Yeah, only 49 million units, which is quite good. I mean, it is one of the best. But when talking about the most successful game systems of all time, numbers in this region aren't normally brought up. It's crazy to me that some of the most iconic systems out there, the NES, Sega Genesis, Nintendo 64, Atari 2600, sold as few units as they did. Now, 49 million is still a lot, but the SNES didn't do as well as it could have. It's hard to believe, but ever since the NES, Nintendo systems were going down in unit sales. The SNES sold 13 million less than its predecessor, and with the sheer quality of games that were released on it, we need to expand the definition of treason. However, the sales decrease makes sense for a couple of reasons. To many consumers, the Nintendo Entertainment System was merely the hot toy for a few years. The idea of upgrading your video game console to the next big thing, it didn't make much sense to them. Why would I get that new Nintendo? This one works just fine. And it smells. They viewed it as a toy or something along the lines of a VHS player, and the only reason why you'd upgrade either of those is if your last one broke. But I think what made an even bigger difference was the Sega Genesis. You hear a lot of people that went from the original NES to the Sega Genesis.
Yeah, treason.
The NES didn't face as much competition. Anybody that got in its way, oh, it has a body count. I mean, any competitors just weren't exciting. Nobody looked at an Atari 7800 going, damn. The Sega Genesis was Nintendo's first piece of major competition. Without it, obviously, I think the Super Nintendo would have sold significantly more. But as it stands, I'd say it sold as well as it did due to amazing games and loads of them at that. Though it didn't sell as much as it could have due to heavy competition from Sega and the climate of upgrading video game consoles at the time. Man, that's just sad. The Xbox One, estimated to have sold roughly 51 million units, not bad. The PlayStation 4 absolutely demolished the One by selling over twice as many consoles. Now, to be fair, the Xbox One is a week younger than the PS4. So it's been on the market for less time, let's give it that. But the Xbox One struggled to put much of a dent into the PlayStation 4's tyranny. And if you were there during both consoles' reveals, you know why. The PS4 had a nearly flawless track record with fans from reveal to release. Sure, getting rid of backwards compatibility was lame, but hey, here are games and a system.
Holy shit.
The Xbox One's reveal was watered down by talks about Kinect, TV, and streaming functionality, watching live sports titles, Call of Duty. It was everything people despise about the Xbox 360 at this point, wrapped up in a neat little piece of shit. As time went on, it was revealed the console would require an internet connection to work. It would block used games from being played, and the system would retail for $499. And at E3 2013, Sony revealed that the PS4 wouldn't be doing any of this and cost $100 less. Spec sheets showcased how the PS4 was actually more powerful than the Xbox One, and the games Sony revealed for the console I mean, they weren't amazing, but they were games. That initial reveal ruined Microsoft's chances to sell more Xbox Ones. Ever since, you just ask, why would I buy that instead of a PS4? And honest to God, I don't know any live being who answered that. The exclusive games just weren't there. The PS4 took a bit to get some genuine must-have exclusives, but when they started hitting, it was already all over for Xbox. Their exclusives were either more Halo, Gears of War, and Forza, or some of the most forgettable exclusive games I've ever seen for a system. And a lot of the best games you could only play on Xbox One, well, they were also available for PC. And or eventually came to other consoles. And even Microsoft mainstays like Halo had a rough time on Xbox One. The Master Chief Collection launched in an abysmal state. Halo 5 was Halo 5. Gears of War just kept trucking along and only really appealed to Gears of War fans at that point. And even then, some Gears of War fans don't care anymore. And Forza's good, but it's fucking Forza! The only reasons to get the Xbox One was for the Xbox Game Pass service, which was a great deal. You get all these different games for a small fee per month. The backwards compatibility they started offering later down the line, which was a legitimate knock against the PS4, which had literally nothing of this nature, or just because your friends are on Xbox and you wanted to play with them online. There was no other reason to get the Xbox One, but the Xbox brand has millions of diehard fans. No matter what, you want to stick with Xbox, and over time, the Xbox One with revisions became more affordable, consumer-friendly, and powerful than what Sony was offering. Due to its similarities with the PS4, most multi-platform games came to Xbox One, which didn't make it immediately unappealing. Millions of these console sales are from people who literally just play FIFA and Call of Duty. And wouldn't you know, do I have a console for you?
The Nintendo DS.
Coming in at 61 million units, the Nintendo Entertainment System took the world by storm in the mid-80s. You'd think for something this popular and iconic, it would be in the 6 billion units sold range. Like water. Frankly, the NES did a ton of heavy lifting popularizing video games as a viable market, a medium you could trust. The Atari 2600 initiated the home console boom, but failed to capitalize on it in the long run, burning retailers and consumers out with the lack of quality and quantity control. Thus, the original Atari only sold 30 million units, which is pretty surprising considering how popular and iconic it was. Though back then, these things were huge investments, especially considering how new the video game industry was. Not as many people were willing to splurge on that kind of entertainment. I'll think about it. The NES effectively doubled Atari's install base by not only being more trustworthy, but being home to games every kid had to play. You needed to get Super Mario Brothers, you needed to get The Legend of Zelda, and these were experiences that would last you a while. A system as popular as the NES in the 80s would have sold twice as many units today. I feel like capping it off at 61 million is just because of it being released in the early days of home console gaming. Because the statistics just don't make any sense. So in 1991, you're trying to tell me only a little over 1% of the world had access to Snow Bros? Okay. Now this is interesting, the Nintendo 3DS. Frankly, I think only 4 people bought these things, they just like getting all the colors. Roughly 76 million sold, that's no easy feat, but that's pretty much half of what its predecessor sold, the Nintendo DS, spoiler. Why such a steep decline? Gamers would praise the 3DS non-stop, lauding it as this massive success when there were more PSP-like systems that sold more, like the PSP. And that was considered to be a slight disappointment. But see, gamers like the 3DS, and they aren't people. The 3DS didn't win over the same casual market the DS did, mainly because around this time, those users moved over to smartphone gaming. Any casual-oriented titles on the 3DS that were sequels to DS successes usually didn't turn out that great. I mean, the 3DS was fundamentally a DS with some pro guts, and it's like casuals don't care if Nintendogs is running on a dual-core CPU now. They already moved on from the DS line of handhelds, and the glasses-free 3D display wasn't gonna bring them back because they weren't interested in buying anything that was 3D outside of a 90-minute trip to the movie theater. Thus, Nintendo's hit list decreased. The 3DS primarily appealed to core fans and kids. And with how cheap the system got, you can't blame some people for jumping into it even if only one game interested them. I know for a fact millions of people would just buy it for one game or two, plus many fans would upgrade their handhelds when new ones would get announced. This number does not represent the amount of active users at one time, not by a long shot. To be fair, you can make that argument for all video game systems, but the 3DS had 6 revisions, with each and every one giving some knuckleheads a reason to upgrade. I've seen people upgrade to the new 2DS XL because it looks so nice. The top screen looks like a smartphone. Yes, they went to public school. The 3DS was a handheld many bought because they wanted Nintendo experiences and they weren't gonna invest in a corpse. Yet outside of that core demographic, there really wasn't a reason for most casual users to care about the system. It looked like a kid's toy. Many people were embarrassed to play it in public.
Yeah, well, guess what? It doesn't want to be seen being played by you.
I mean, Nintendo's advertising during this generation was so bad that many haven't even heard of this thing yet. And when they did, can you blame people for being embarrassed for liking Nintendo? But because of a vast and appealing lineup of software, consistent hardware revisions, and a gimmick that got some people interested at launch, the 3DS sold well. Just not as well as other Nintendo handhelds. What happened here? The day the PSP sells over 80 million is the day Well, I don't want to finish that sentence and f myself over. How did the PSP sell around 81 million units? Who talks about this system anymore? The PlayStation Portable was a big deal, no doubt, but anybody I knew who had one, I never saw them play it. Fast forward to today, and it's not discussed nearly as much as you'd think it would be, considering it sold as many units as it did. Now, that may be because I'm sheltered, but the PSP overall seems to be something most people look back at fondly, but don't want to revisit a ton. Kind of like an old iPod, like, oh man, so many memories with this thing. Want to use it for music? Oh, no. A lot of people will say the PSP sold well because everybody knew it was easy to hack and you could put emulators on it. Most people don't even know the 3DS exists. Why would they know that? I think the PSP sold this much due to the excitement of what it was and represented. The PlayStation brand was on top of the world. The PS1 and PS2 won their respective generations with record-breaking numbers. Everybody owned these consoles. They dethroned Nintendo as the market leader, and now they're entering the portable scene with a handheld that can do PS2 quality visuals? We were all used to 2D sprites on the Game Boy Advance. We could all only dream of taking PS2 games on the go, and the PSP promised exactly that. Dozens of articles claimed that the PSP was going to win the war against the Nintendo DS because, by God, why wouldn't it? You got Spider-Man 2 at the launch, and this ain't no phony baloney Game Boy Advance or Nintendo DS version. Nah, this is gonna be the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube Spider-Man 2 on the go. Do you have no shame? So I think the PSP did live up to the hype of being a home console to go. I mean, games like this on something so small is still crazy impressive to me. It had a decent amount of console ports, so you could be playing that PS2 game just in a morgue. But some games weren't the console versions. They were watered down PSP versions, like Spider-Man 2. This isn't the same game as the consoles. It's still an impressive handheld game for the time, comparable to a console game in many ways. But it's not the console game, so it makes the PSP feel like, oh, it can't do this. But then the games that were the exact console games on the PSP, well, the PSP was comparable, but not as powerful as the PS2. It lacked the 2 triggers, a second stick. Even if it were a perfect port of the game, it would still be inferior on the PSP. Camera control there would always be some garbage workaround. Exclusive games in the biggest franchises were relegated to PSP entries. Most of them were inconsequential to their series. It wasn't the next Grand Theft Auto game, it was Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories, a side game. The same goes for the God of War series or Gran Turismo, Killzone. A lot of these PSP versions of console mainstays were done by B-grade developers, not numbered mainline entries in their respective series. It made the PSP feel like something you could totally skip and not miss anything on. Either way you slice it, the PSP was impressive. There just wasn't a lot to keep players coming back. Yes, it was console quality on the go, but that can only get you so far after a purchase. You go, wow, this is just like a PS2 game, but that means it's not super designed for portable play, and on top of that, the PSP used a spinning disc drive, which good luck playing that on a horse. If you play it at home on the couch, why not just play your PS2? If you're playing it on the go, it's not as portable friendly as something like the DS. There were better alternatives in both scenarios. I'm still in awe playing the PSP. It's so tiny yet plays games of this graphical quality. However, I think many players bought one, played it a bit, then kind of just moved on. It had some amazing games and impressive hardware, but it just felt like many people bought the PSP out of hype, liked it, but didn't really go back to it. As a kid, the true success of some products normally doesn't dawn upon you. NASDAQ was only my 47th word. But back then, it felt like everybody and their mother owned a Game Boy Advance, and with it selling 81.5 million units, that was practically the case, though it sold roughly the same as the PSP? That doesn't seem right. It was almost the de facto game system. No matter who you were, you had a Game Boy Advance, and that was due to a few reasons. The price entry was incredibly low. This was one of the cheapest and easily accessible game systems out there at the time. The name and brand was undeniably recognizable. Even these days, people still refer to anything with a battery as a Game Boy. It won't hold up in court, but it just goes to show how iconic the title of Game Boy is. And of course, the games. Not only did the Game Boy Advance have constant releases of all types, whether they were Nintendo first-party titles, third-party, or licensed kids games, but the Game Boy Advance was compatible with Game Boy and Game Boy Color games as well, luring in owners of those past systems and new ones as it already had a library of hundreds of games upon release. There was something for everybody here, something for the core gamer and something for their stepdad's daughter. And with 3 redesigns, people had incentive to upgrade from the first model to the newer Game Boy Advance SP, which makes me think 81.5 million units seems a bit lower than I'd expect. I think what stopped the GBA from selling even more was the lack of a definitive hook outside of, it's a Game Boy, but more. Nintendo truly excelled in sales when they introduced something new with a gimmick that's not just, it's more powerful. The Game Boy Advance is probably their most recent success that didn't have any major gimmicks involved. It was a video game machine through and through, which is why so many people adore it. But looking at its successor, it's obvious while Nintendo can successfully make a standard game console in the modern day, they still need a specific hook to lure everybody in. The Xbox 360 is well known as the winner of the battle between it and the PlayStation 3. Who did it pay off? 84 million units sold. The 360 dominated the better part of the battle for the 7th generation, and for good reason. Nobody wanted a PlayStation 3. Well, in actuality, I think everybody wanted a PS3 to some extent. The follow-up to the uber-popular PlayStation 2, it was considered the most powerful thing on the planet. Move over, Christ. But that price point was disgusting. And the amount of games just wasn't appealing. The Xbox 360 had a year head start on the PS3, had far more games, was considerably more powerful, and was pretty comparable to the PS3 graphics-wise. Even though that system was more powerful, many developers didn't have the time or money to fully take advantage of it, so they developed games for the more accessible Xbox 360 first and foremost, then maybe brought them over to PS3. Exclusives like Gears of War and Halo brought millions over to the 360, while the PlayStation 3 was struggling to sell. Online play was better on Xbox, many preferred the controller, digital Netflix streaming was exclusive for a bit, and in 2010, they introduced the Kinect, which revolutionized the act of hatred. That brought an entire new subset of consumers over to the brand, all of them casuals who simply thought the act of kicking the air was worth $150. Because of this, the Xbox 360 became the face of hardcore gaming. That original model and controller are burned into my brain as what you think of in an unfinished basement setup. But after the Kinect launched, it felt like Microsoft put the 360 on autopilot. The only exclusives releasing at that point were more Kinect games, which frankly, after about a year being on the market, I think most people who bought the thing gave up on it, or they were sequels to series that already kind of peaked. The entire marketing campaign for Halo 3 was finishing the fight. Do it again. Right when the 360 started to pump the brakes, the PS3 was entering a bit of a renaissance, which brings us here. Just barely beating the Xbox 360 right when the generation came to a close, the PlayStation 3 sold 87.5 million units, which surprised many. I think most people still think the 360 won this war. This system was almost always seen as a flop in comparison to the competition, being overpriced, overpowered, undergood. But like I said, by the midway point in the generation, Microsoft stopped giving people as much of a reason to buy a 360, while Sony was continuing to pump out exclusives. In June of 2013, I saw so many people buy a PS3 just to play The Last of Us, and that was even the year the PlayStation 4 released. Sony was hell-bent on saving the PS3 after it was flopping hard, redesigning it twice. These models may not have been as capable as the original. I mean, they removed the Spider-Man font. Frankly, the PS3 didn't sell initially because it cost too much and there just weren't enough exclusives in third-party games, and most of the third-party games ran better on 360 anyways because it was easier for developers to program for. However, Sony addressed many of the complaints as the generation went on, and I think the PS3 is a shining example that poor sales at the start, well, those don't mean things won't work out in the end. Just you wait. This was the biggest sensation of all time, and it didn't even sell 102 million. I'm not sure if there will ever be something as hot as the Wii during its heyday, or at the very least something that feels like it. Every store you'd look, they'd be sold out. People were flipping them for 3 times more on eBay, and this wasn't just the hardcore fans wanting them. Everybody knew how hard it was to get a Wii for the first 3 years of the product's life, and everybody wanted one. It was a sensation. It didn't matter you didn't know what it did, you just knew it was what you needed to buy. And it was all because the Wii captured the world's imagination. Utilizing motion controls to swing tennis rackets, it made tennis possible for many of us. And the initial price of $249.99 was lower than the Xbox 360 and definitely lower than the PlayStation 3, and that was because the Wii was incredibly underpowered. It was basically just a souped up GameCube spec-wise. The Wii cost roughly $2 to produce. The games helped showcase how amazing these controllers were. Online capabilities allowed users to download classic games, and with the Wii just flat out being able to play GameCube discs made it capable of playing games from all prior Nintendo home consoles and then some. The price was affordable to many, so why did the PlayStation 1 outsell it? I think that fact alone makes Nintendo hate the alphabet. While the Wii's success could also be attributed to it being a fad. Millions bought it, loved it, and kept buying software for it, but many of the sales were from people who bought it just because they thought it was their civil duty to do so. Buy it for Wii Sports, maybe buy Wii Fit afterwards, you're done. Didn't help that Nintendo stopped supporting the platform as much around 2011, and this was the time where if you didn't already have a Wii, you probably weren't gonna buy one then. After everyone who wanted a Wii bought one, they were readily available. There wasn't that huge urge to buy one as much, especially considering there wasn't a ton of compelling software releasing from 2011 onwards, while the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 were much more exciting around then. These consoles had a future. The Wii felt like it was old news, especially considering the lackluster graphics, not even including HDMI. There were some great core titles on Wii. But if those interested you, the 360 and PS3 were probably going to satisfy you a bit more. The Wii appealed to a casual market, and that's the reason it was such a runaway success. But that success was fleeting. It didn't stick around, and sales started to slow down. It's obvious the Wii did well, but there's a reason why developers still preferred to make games for competing platforms. I think Nintendo could have made this the best-selling system of all time, but the weak hardware and third-party support forced consumers to give up on the Wii quickly. Hell, Nintendo did, and thus, after a while, there wasn't a lot of excitement in buying one anymore. Yeah, it only sold 101 million units. I can do that in my sleep. The original PlayStation. Right off the bat, we have to comment on how incredible of a success this was. The first system by a newcomer. This wasn't Nintendo, this wasn't Sega, this was Sony. But it was proven that during this time, anybody could make a video game console that successfully competed with Nintendo. Sega just proved that with the Sega Genesis, and Sony just went too goddamn far. The PS1, it's incredible how successful it was. At the time, a video game system selling 100 million units, it was unheard of. The use of compact discs can be credited to a lot of its success, as these things were cheaper to produce and could hold so much more information than regular game cartridges. The PS1 was significantly cheaper than the Sega Saturn and released 2 years prior to the Nintendo 64, meaning when that system launched with 2 games, well, 1 game and 1 event. Right when that system was getting started, the PS1 already had hundreds of games. They were getting sequels to blockbuster PS1 exclusives that already released. All the third-party franchises you'd expect on Nintendo, well, they went over to the PlayStation, and on top of that, you could play your music CDs on this thing. Still a step away from Season 4 of Wings, I know, but still! The PlayStation had literally everything going for it during this time, and it didn't get discontinued until 2006, the year the PlayStation 3 released. Even after the PS2 came out, it was a solid budget option for many people, especially with its cheaper redesign. This thing was a runaway success. It's one of the easiest success stories to analyze. Oh, that and the PS4 did as well as it did because it wasn't an Xbox One or Wii U. The Xbox One shot itself in the foot, we already know that, and because of the resistance many consumers had towards the Xbox brand at the time, Sony took advantage of that. They highlighted all the issues people had with the Xbox One and clarified that they wouldn't be a problem on the PS4, while also revealing their system cost $100 less and was more powerful. It made me look at anybody who bought this as a fucking moron. I think the Xbox One had more compelling exclusives at launch, but it didn't matter because eventually the PS4 started to get blockbuster after blockbuster exclusive game, a feat that the Xbox One just never reached. Frankly, I do truly believe the PS4 did as well as it did because it was really the only choice for many. I mean, you didn't want that because it was more expensive, less powerful, and already proved itself as untrustworthy in an alley. You didn't want that because just buy a PS4. People flocked to Amazon after Sony's E3 2013 showing to pre-order PS4s, which I always found silly because, like I said, I do think Xbox had a better initial showing of software during that E3. Look at the PS4's first year. The viewer discretion is advised. While I think the initial success of the system had a lot to do with the Xbox One's failure, eventually the PS4 found its footing with must-have exclusives, and on top of that, it had all the third-party games, and the best versions of them. Now, after both companies redesigned their consoles and pushed upgrades out the door with better specs, the Xbox One X was more powerful than the PS4 Pro. But at this point, it didn't matter. The war was already over. While the Xbox One became the more advanced system, the PS4 still had the games people wanted to play. What do you want me to say here? It's the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. Of course, I will admit the Game Boy and Game Boy Color aren't separate systems, and the Color was just a mere refresh of the Game Boy when I'm dead and buried. Still not buried, but Nintendo groups these two together, so sure, it counts. But the reasoning behind the success is pretty much the exact same as the Game Boy Advance. It was the go-to thing to get kids for the back seat. It was cheap enough to buy one or even a couple for multiple kid households. The inclusion of Tetris in the package, well, that lured in millions right there. Not only kids, but their parents as well. This was one of the first instances of a Nintendo product being marketed towards everybody, not just kids. And we can see that works well for them. The initial price was $90, $70 for the redesigned Game Boy Pocket. It was so cheap for a game system. You didn't have much of an excuse. And if you did, well, you were probably trying to cover up something. Other handhelds had color screens, lit screens for that matter, but the Game Boy had affordability and a never-ending game lineup to boot. Now this sales figure is definitely a little skewed considering not only are we including the original Game Boy, but Game Boy Color as well. Though to be fair, the Xbox One X is included in the Xbox One sales, the PS4 Pro with the PS4, the new 3DS with the 3DS, and that had exclusive games just like the Game Boy Color did. The amount of new 3DS software though, what are you standing there for? Go! How the hell did this happen? The Nintendo DS sold over 154 million units. Am I alone with originally thinking the Wii was a bigger phenomenon? Well, while everybody was talking about not being able to buy a Wii, everybody was buying 5 DSs each. Think about how the Wii's success was fleeting and how software became sparse in the final years. And flip them. The Nintendo DS kept rolling. It had a very similar strategy to the Wii, really reeling in the casual consumers with games like Brain Age. However, it did a better job of appealing to literally everybody. There were games of all kinds on the DS, and the system was at a power level where you could make games for it on a budget. It was cheaper to make DS games for many developers because you didn't have to worry about games not being asked for the eyes. And the games kept coming well after its successor, the 3DS release. Pokemon games kept coming out for the DS until 2012, and with this being a cheaper handheld with multiple revisions, it wasn't uncommon to upgrade. I got the DSi after I had the DS Lite. It's good to know I'm 2 of this number. It's just unbelievable the handheld sold this many. But to be fair, families get multiple DSs for all the siblings, and handhelds get scuffed up more often, thus you're more likely to upgrade them. Something like the Wii, well, the family shares that, and when they release a revision, it's usually just to cut costs and offer a lower price for new customers. There's really no incentive for people to buy multiple consoles, while the DS was a completely different story. This was the go-to handheld. Everybody had one because there wasn't much bad press around it. Outside of Scrabble using the word f***er. Of course your mom liked you owning a DS. You did math and whatever the f*** this is. So it's understandable why a handheld and not a console like this would be such a huge sales juggernaut. And then there was Sony. The PlayStation 2 sold 155 million units, which is obscene. Look at this graph. There's almost no point to having a graph at this point. The PS2 sales numbers can be attributed to many of the same reasons why the PS1 succeeded, but the difference is the competition wasn't completely arthritic. The GameCube was more powerful than the PS2. It used mini DVDs, but still. And the Xbox was so much more powerful and also used DVDs. But the PS2 had backwards compatibility with the PS1, instantly making it a no-brainer for the 100 million PS1 owners. It once again had a year head start on the market. It could play DVD movies right out the box when DVD players were expensive and not as common. Many people just said, F it, I need a DVD player, a way to play Ants, and a way to play Ants. I'd be stupid not to. Let me repeat that again. I'd be stupid not to. The third-party support carried over from the PS1, and Sony was once again funding countless exclusives that rocked the world. Sure, the Xbox had a lot of what the PS2 was offering, but the PlayStation brand became one of the most widely trusted in all of gaming. After 100 million PS1 users saw the PS2 was here and could play movies and all their old PS1 games in addition to the big new releases, and pretty much all of them considering developers didn't want to miss out on the PS2. I mean, the only games that missed the system? Well, can you blame me for going with GameCube?
I think it just goes to show that the best-selling consoles aren't always the most powerful, or they don't always have the best games of the generation or whatever. Those elements help, but at the end of the day, it depends on the context of it all. Like, is it the PlayStation 2? If it is, it'll do well. I don't make the rules. Okay, well, that was a way to blow past 30 minutes. That still doesn't change the fact that I was robbed of everything last week, but everything will be fine. I'm looking at the bright side. I may have been robbed of everything, but that means I can't get robbed anymore. That's my solution to everything. Scared of home invasion? Go homeless! Hey y'all, Scott here. This is getting old. I may have finally stopped getting robbed 2 weeks ago, but I just started getting robbed 3 weeks ago. Okay, this is getting ridiculous. I'm gonna make some calls and get to the bottom of this.
A bank?
The bank?
A bank.
Yeah, I was wondering if I could take out a loan to assign a hit.
Let me check. Are you sure your name isn't you?
No.
Yeah, we repossessed most of your belongings. We are a bank after all.
Oh, thank God, I wasn't robbed!
Eh.
So, can I take out a loan to repossess the repossessed?
No, we repossessed your stuff for a reason. We asked if you had any debts and you just wrote SOS.
Yeah.
Listen, I've seen your services around town. We'll send you a care package to help you get back on your feet, but until then, sir, this is a Domino's.
I thought you said this was a bank.
Yeah, a night bank.
I'll make this work.
The classics. Games you may not play all the time, but the idea you can play them on your current system and pull them out whenever and wherever you are, it helps you sleep at night. And honest to God, what's better to fiddle in your pocket with than Ice Climber? This is a lineup of games released for the Game Boy Advance throughout 2004, titled the Classic NES Series. Old school games for the Nintendo Entertainment System re-released on GBA for 20 bucks a pop. You can beat that deal. This is one of Nintendo's first major instances of really pushing nostalgia for that NES era, releasing these games alongside a special edition Game Boy Advance SP modeled after the system. Same thing in Japan, they released a model of the handheld designed after the Japanese NES, the Famicom. Look how tiny this box is, it's adorable. I think the North American variant wins in the handheld aesthetic departments though. I mean, yeah, it does mimic the Famicom, but oh boy, ketchup and mayonnaise. Now, the Famicom released in 1983, the NES released in 1985. All of this happened in 2004, so I think they were trying to break even for the system's 20th anniversary. They were probably just rounding up.
Yeah, I'm 24, though I always round up, so to be more precise, I'm 2.
I, for one, am sort of critical of Nintendo's over-reliance on nostalgia sometimes, but I'm their target demographic for this because no matter what they do, if it's 8-bit, I don't think, I just clap. Like, man, you're really pushing things here. They had the nerve to sell Ice Climber for $20. Yeah, $20 was cheaper than regular Game Boy Advance games, so this isn't a regular Game Boy Advance game, it's Ice Climber. But this NES Game Boy Advance SP is so cool. The outside is like the system, but the inside is like the controller. It's even textured like an actual NES gamepad. Okay, so I really like this design, but it just reminds me of the people who wear NES t-shirts.
I'm awkward.
The Game Boy Micro also got a special edition themed around the Famicom, this time the controller. This one released in 2005 in both Japan and the US, and I think this design eclipses both SPs. It is gorgeous. Though this was released specifically in commemoration of the 20th anniversary with no real ties to the classic NES series. Well, 12 games were released under the classic NES series label, with most hitting store shelves on June 2nd, 2004 alongside the special edition SP, plus a few more later on October 25th, 2004. Most of them were Nintendo developed and published titles. We got Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, Donkey Kong, Excite Bike, Ice Climber, Dr. Mario, Metroid, and Zelda 2. Though there were also a few third-party games licensed to Nintendo for release in the series. Pac-Man, Bomberman, Xevious, and Castlevania. Aesthetically speaking, these are really fun to put all next to each other. They all follow a basic black design, reminiscent of the original black box Nintendo releases. However, most of these games didn't originally have the black box design, one with a few sprites and the big title in that iconic font, so Nintendo gave them a black box design. They cropped their box arts and put them on black. It's a little lame. I think it would have been fun to actively design covers as if these games had the black box design from back in the day or something, rather than just putting the cover on a black background. I mean, at this point you already have the top of the box saying Classic NES Series. You could have just used the original box art, not cropped, and everything would have still looked uniform and nice. But no, you just had to put more effort in to make it look like you put less effort in. The boxes do feel like mini NES game boxes, boxes though, I'll give them that. The back descriptions and screenshots are unique compared to the NES originals, mentioning how the NES Classic is back. Finally, play Pac-Man on the go for the 20th time ever. But they still feel very genuinely charming and retro. Even if they don't cost a lot on eBay right now, you still want to treat them with respect. Most of these releases were born to die being a collectible. The next big indicator of a classic NES series title is the cartridge itself. Now most people would probably go, what's the difference? And to that I say, invest in neon. Classic NES GBA games are a lighter tone of gray, the exact same lighter tone of gray as legitimate NES game cartridges. They put so much damn detail in all of this. This truly feels like they legitimately cared. Turns out they did these few things just to barely reach that bar. Alright, so let's try these out. First up, we can't go wrong with a little bit of Super Mario Brothers. Unless you use it as insulin. Look at that in all its glory. You know, I can't understate how amazing it was to finally get these games in an uncompromised portable form. Put a D in front of that. So this is Super Mario Brothers on the NES, on the Game Boy Advance. However, fun quirk of the Game Boy Advance was the screen size. It's not 4:3, it's not widescreen. I consider it husky. NES games were all 4:3, so Nintendo had two options. Either put black bars on the sides like a Samaritan, or embrace chaos. So they filled the screen. Good for them. I'm sure if they didn't, the group of people who play retro games stretched with smoothing filters on, minimized with borders, well, there's no telling what they'd do. Our nation is separated. They didn't just simply stretch the games to fill the screen though, they meticulously removed unnecessary pixels to effectively fit the game in this wonky resolution. Thus, whatever the fuck this is. You have to give them credit, they wanted to see these games fill the screen and they did it without simply stretching them, though they still look a little wonky. But hey, let's see if I can compare this to similar releases. Here we have Super Mario Bros. Deluxe on Game Boy Color. It's similarly a version of Super Mario Brothers you can play on the go. So here's the advantage you get with the classic NES series. They didn't just zoom into the screen. With Deluxe, sometimes you can't see what's above you, behind you, in front of you, because they just zoomed in to make everything viewable on such a tiny screen. So the GBA version is a bit more playable. But you're missing the calendar. Super Mario Bros. Deluxe was a new deluxe version of Mario 1. It included extra modes, a save feature. Mario 2 from Japan was included. Tons of little bonus features that I just adore. Like, come on, is this necessary? No, and that's what's fun about it. Classic NES series Super Mario Bros. Is just Super Mario Brothers. There's nothing else to it, and that's what the classic NES series was. They weren't remakes, they were by and large the original NES games, no frills, for your Game Boy Advance. I mean, pressing LNR brings us this menu. Ooh. Damn everybody, let's talk about the weather app! Well, Super Mario Brothers is a classic game. It's one that'll never get old and one that's great to have at a moment's notice. It plays well here, and while it was possible to play the game in some capacity on the Game Boy Advance before, this version is much more tailor-made for the handheld while also being more true to the original. Of course, it had to be a part of the classic NES series. Now, is it worth the $20 MSRP? Well, for like $10 more, you could get any of the Mario Advance series, which were fully fleshed out remakes and ports of the other 2D Mario games, including some new levels, mechanics, modes, the side game of Mario Brothers. It's a tough situation because the entire gimmick of these releases is that, oh, it's the original NES game on a smaller cartridge. Honestly, making these collections or something would have taken away from that collectability, I guess. And $20, I mean, that's kind of the bare minimum you can price a physical game without discounts or price cuts. I'd say this one is a bit iffy on if it makes sense for $20. At the time, you could definitely find a copy of Super Mario Bros. Deluxe for less, which had more features. Plus, back in 2004, I think our nation was more used to screen crunch like this. I'd put this in the middle on the worth 20 scale. Next up, Ice Climber. I think Nintendo re-released this for a tax break. Ice Climber is an iconic NES classic. Sure, most of its appeal comes from the character's inclusion in Smash Bros., which is 100% why the game was put in this series. Smash Bros. Melee did a number to the interest in various franchises. It's what convinced Nintendo to bring Fire Emblem outside of Japan, so I think they decided to re-release Ice Climber for that very same reason. Can't wait for that return on investment! The original Ice Climber isn't a terrible game, it's just a bad one. I think there's a bit of merit to this game, like the controls are absolutely atrocious, but I think that's partially on purpose to give the game more challenge. But you can select any level from the start, so it's like, who cares about the challenge? There, I beat the game. The 2-player mode was seemingly removed, that remained in Super Mario Bros., but the multiplayer in that game is just past the Game Boy when you die. But alas, you have to connect another Game Boy Advance to have the option appear. Good. For $20, no, hell, I'll pay you $20 to stay away. It has its charm and a place in Nintendo history. I do sort of like it in some respects. Its core gameplay is fairly enjoyable. It's just the damn controls, man. But as nice as I'm willing to be about this game, let's be fair. This game, as its standalone Game Boy Advance release, that! This This should be nothing more than a side game in a bigger game, like Mario Bros. Arcade and the Mario Advance releases. And I think what stings the most here is the fact that Nintendo already re-released Ice Climber as an e-reader card set for the Game Boy Advance. Yeah, so this was a major piece of criticism against the classic NES series. The fact that a good handful of these games, they were already on the Game Boy Advance via e-reader cards. Though let's be reasonable here, the e-reader was an accessory for the GBA that nobody heard of until 2 sentences ago. You'd scan cards to unlock goodies in games or play games right off the cards. Thus, some NES games were re-released via this method for $5 a pack. Of course, you already had to own the e-reader, which cost $40 in of itself. Keep the e-reader plugged in the entire time and hopelessly scan 5 cards in a row. The opportunity cost may outweigh things here. It's a little unfair to be like, oh, well, you sold Ice Climber for $5, Nintendo. Why is it $20 now? Because you already had to own an e-reader. Scanning cards was clunky compared to just inserting a cartridge. Just buying the classic NES series game is a simpler option here. Doesn't mean the game is worth $20. Excite Bike! Now this has more value than Ice Climber in my opinion. I think everybody likes Excite Bike. Either that or nobody cares enough to put energy into hating it. Wow, you hate Excite Bike? You fucking badass! Well, it is the same game as before. You can save your custom build tracks now. It's not that elegant. You don't get a ton of save slots like you do in the 3D Classics remake for 3DS, but it's a noticeable upgrade from how the game operated on NES. This was another game that was already on e-reader card, so that was an issue. You can save your custom tracks in that version, so I finally understand the value of $15. Excite Bike's a better game than Ice Climber though, and has more replay value. I'd say it's in the middle on the $20 scale. Donkey Kong, plain ass, old ass, Donkey Kong ass Donkey Kong. To answer your question, it's not the arcade version, it's the NES version. What did you think we've been talking about? Donkey Kong's always fun to replay, but I mean, it's just 3 levels, 1 screen each. And the NES version, while perfectly fine, it cuts out one of the stages from the arcade game, the Pie Factory. So it's like, sure, you can use this game to just try to go for the high score, but wouldn't that feel more rewarding if you had the true arcade version in the palm of your hands? You could practice and practice and practice on Game Boy and show up to the arcade, get the high score, and in tandem laid. This is just a way to play Donkey Kong on the go, but at that point, just get Donkey Kong for Game Boy. That original arcade game was remade and there's 90 plus puzzle platformer levels afterwards, and that game cost around like $4 in 2004. Plus Donkey Kong was another e-reader release. Also, they could have re-released Donkey Kong Classics, which was Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. on one NES cartridge. I know the whole gimmick is it's the original authentic one NES game now on your GBA, but like, come on. $20? I love the original Donkey Kong, but this is pushing it. Frankly, I don't think it's worth it. The Legend of Zelda. See, this is one of those games they forced the black box design on. Like, it looks fine and standardized with the rest of the series, but would it have really looked that out of place with the original box art design, just with the red header on top? This was the first time Zelda 1 was available portably, and it's an incredibly solid version. They even went in and fixed up some text here in the beginning that was in dire need of an editor in the original. I think Zelda works great as a handheld game. If this was your first time playing, it can take a while to get through if you don't immediately know where to go, and I think portability helps as you can kind of chip away at it. I would have loved to see a remake of this game on Game Boy Advance, a la how Nintendo remade Metroid 1 as Metroid Zero Mission, but for $20, I think this was a standout release. You would definitely get your money's worth out of this game. Until 2 years later when Nintendo re-released it on Wii's Virtual Console for $5. Alright, so those were the Nintendo games on June 2nd. What about the third parties? I am sorry I asked. Bomberman by Hudson. Now, Nintendo still published these Game Boy Advance versions, and I'm sure they developed these ports, but this was always a Hudson Soft property. Well, Bomberman has always been there for most Nintendo platforms. I'm sure some people think of him as a Nintendo character. Hell, he's been in Nintendo games with Nintendo characters. So this makes sense. On paper, one of the defining elements of Bomberman games is the multiplayer mode, and it's not locked behind a link cable, it's just not here. It's just the single player mode from the NES game. It's fine, but you do realize how many ways there were to play Bomberman on Game Boy Advance, right? I mean, most Bomberman games are kind of interchangeable. A Bomberman game is a Bomberman game. Some are better than others, but at the end of the day, most will give you your Bomberman fix. So it's like, all of these exist, you know? And Bomberman's known for multiplayer. You take it out of the equation and the main game is okay, but it's so strange to me that they went to all this trouble to preserve elements of these other titles, but strip Bomberman of its headlining feature. No! Pac-Man, it's the NES version, of course, and I've been critical of this one before. Listen, it's not a bad edition of the game at all. I just don't like when products claim to have Pac-Man included and it's the damn NES version of the game. You're telling me I got horny for nothing? Like, the graphics and sound are just different enough to make this feel kinda lame. This is one of the strangest inclusions to the series. Pac-Man was already well represented on the Game Boy Advance. You had an Namco museum with the original arcade version alongside a handful of other Namco classics, and Pac-Man Collection, which had Pac-Man and various other games from the series. Both of these games came out well before the classic NES series release of Pac-Man, so it's fair to say you could find them for $20 or less at this point. So this just feels like a waste. Why would you buy this outside of collector's purposes? There's no reason for this to exist. I think Nintendo did this one because it's Pac-Man. It's not like it's an iconic NES game, but I think it kind of helped bring more eyes to the lineup. Like, everybody knows Pac-Man, and it kind of reminds them of the NES era, so sure, I didn't eat lunch today. It's like on the front of the NES Classic Edition mini console box. Like, why is Pac-Man highlighted here? There are so many other games iconic to the NES that they could have chosen to represent. Instead,
Did you say Pac-Man?
and finally, we had Xevious on this day, another Namco arcade classic getting its NES version re-released. They added auto-fire to this version, which is kind of nice, but other than that, it's Xevious. Oh my god, finally. At least this game wasn't available elsewhere on Game Boy Advance, so good for me, I get it all to myself. But I'm an American, alright? If there's two things I don't care about, it's my morals and Xevious. This game was far more popular in Japan, and while I think it's still fairly well known over here, there are so many other NES games. Hell, Namco or Nintendo developed and published games that would have made so much more sense for a classic NES series re-release. A fine game, it's a little too high score centric for me to consider it worth the $20, though I think it's at the very least half worth it. And that was the first wave of the classic NES series. Cool collectibles that just didn't have a ton of value outside of that. The games they picked were so basic, it made it difficult to warrant picking some of these up, which I think they tried to rectify this complaint with the second and final wave. On October 25th, 2004, we got 4 more titles. First up, Dr. Mario. Oh, guys, come on. Did you really have to put black bars around the artwork? Who cares? Most of the image is the artwork anyways. Just go all the way. Especially the third-party games I just went over. These just look bad. Pac-Man probably looks the best, but I reckon they cropped out most of the artwork, and the original box art would have just been so easy to translate over. And Xevious, well, they just didn't care. Dr. Mario's a safe bet being a puzzle game. You'll for sure get your time out of this one. If you wanted to play a Dr. Mario game on the handheld, this was giving you exactly what you were looking for. You could have gotten the original Game Boy version. Hell, that one technically sold better than the NES one, so more people may have had memories of this one, strangely enough. But for a game all about matching light colors, stay away. Though there were more ways to play Dr. Mario on GBA. In WarioWare Mega Micro games, you could unlock the Dr. Wario game, which was fundamentally NES Dr. Mario, just with a few sprites changed. And a year after this classic NES series release, you could pick up Dr. Mario and Puzzle League, which included a much better version of Dr. Mario and another puzzle game entirely. The best puzzle game entirely. You know what? I'll say this was worth the 20 bones. At least at the time. I mean, this was perfect for the pick up and play style. There wasn't a Dr. Mario on the system natively at the time. The closest thing was an unlockable minigame in WarioWare, and that wasn't like a full port of NES Dr. Mario. It was a joke inclusion that could also effectively double as a Dr. Mario alternative in a pinch. And Dr. Mario and Puzzle League came out afterwards, so you can't really blame them for that. I will give this my full praises. It might have been worth $20. Metroid, this kind of works with the black box design, considering Metroid was one of the games that followed the template but used silver for some reason. If anything, this box actually might look better than the original. Metroid can be hard to go back to, especially without a map system. It's hard to know where to go and even where you are, which is why I would recommend the remake on Game Boy Advance, Metroid Zero Mission. It does a phenomenal job contextualizing that original NES game as a modern title. It has quality of life improvements without feeling too easy or like it's holding your hand, while also featuring tons of added content. It's the definitive way to experience the first game in the series. And it came out in February of 2004 and included the original NES Metroid in its entirety as an unlockable for beating the game. I guess this is for the people who wanted to play the original Metroid on GBA but didn't want to put in the work to beat Metroid Zero Mission to unlock it. Honey, if you want to play Metroid 1 but not Metroid Zero Mission, that's your own damn fault. This is just weird. I mean, the version of Metroid included in Zero Mission is basically the exact same. There are a few discrepancies, like some sprites look a little different in the Zero Mission version, but they're both NES Metroid. There's no true differences. It's hard to imagine Metroid not being a part of this series, I get that, but when you already released Metroid Zero Mission earlier that year, it just feels unnecessary. If it were the other way around and this came out before Zero Mission, then sure, but no, instead, they're forcing me to bitch about it 17 years later.
Those bastards.
Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. Following in the steps of the Zelda 1 box design-wise, this is another solid investment. Zelda 2 may not have been the most beloved Zelda title, but it's still a good game. It's just different, and the amount of playtime you get out of it, well, I think it makes it well worth the $20 price tag. And finally, Castlevania, the last classic NES series title, and another third-party one by Konami. Come on, guys. It's just a really stupid cropping of the silver box art. Like, really? I think this is also well worth the investment. Castlevania was already in a renaissance on the Game Boy Advance with 3 original titles on it. Those followed in the footsteps of Castlevania Symphony of the Night, so there was still a void of classic Castlevania. And I think this was a great addition to the lineup.
Well, that's the classic NES series. For collectors, it's a pretty fun series. It's cool to have these miniature NES boxes and great cartridges and try to go for them all. But for players, I just feel like there's not enough there to warrant a purchase. These games were just kind of neat little novelties, but that was about it. The only games I think that you could actually warrant a purchase on were Zelda 1, 2, and Castlevania. But they were kind of cool releases just for the novelty alone. And just like that, Japan told us to go f*** ourselves.
These are the Japanese versions of the classic NES series, titled the Famicom Mini series. They went above and beyond in Japan. First off, the packaging, it's entirely unique. Unlike traditional GBA game boxes, a clear plastic container with numerous cardboard inserts holding an exact replica of the original box art, now the size of a matchbox. The instructions are all folded up, nice and neat. These just feel like so much love and attention was put into them. Even games that originally had different box dimensions on the Famicom, they accommodated for them, and games that released via the Famicom Disk System, they have their own style of box as well. And because the Disk System games were yellow, the cards are too. The standard games have a color scheme reminiscent of the Famicom console, not the cartridges, because they were all different kinds of colors. It would have been really cool if they used the same colors each cartridge was originally, but this is still neat. The games themselves, it's the same story as before, except these are the Japanese versions. But Japan got dozens more games on top of every single one that released in North America. Mario Brothers, Balloon Fight, Clue Land, Wrecking Crew, Famicom Detective Club 1 and 2, Kid Icarus, The Mysterious Murasame Castle, Shin Onigashima, Super Mario Brothers 2, Mappy, Star Soldier, SD Gundam World, Dig Dug, Gonbear Goemon, Ghost and Goblins, Adventure Island, and Twinbee were all Japan exclusives. And my god, why did we get Ice Climber out of all of these? There were so many games that I think would have made perfect sense in North America. I mean, come on, Dig Dug, and you gave us Xevious? I know Dig Dug was already on Namco Museum, but still, like, why did we get Xevious? I think this lineup of games does a far better job representing the NES, or Famicom technically. I think Contra, Mega Man, Bubble Bobble, Punch-Out, River City Ransom, Double Dragon, Tecmo Bowl, Kung Fu, those seem like they would have been easy to get as a part of the series and would have really helped to lock this in as the perfect celebration of the console that started it all. But these will do. I have similar complaints towards why some of these got the re-release. Like, Mario Brothers? Really? That was included in damn near every Mario game on the Game Boy Advance, and it was a much better version than the NES game. Each day Nintendo re-releases Clue Land, I hear gunshots. However, the Famicom Detective Club games, well, those are huge titles. I can't blame it all, but these were great inclusions for Japanese-speaking players. Balloon Fight I would have preferred compared to Ice Climber over here. There's just far more variety, basically, because there was more released. And they made sure you knew that by releasing these boxes. Japan's Club Nintendo loyalty program offered these collection boxes containing every game from the Famicom Mini series at the time. They came in unique mailers, and sliding them out, we have some of the coolest collectibles I've ever laid eyes on. 3 volumes, the first 2 being the cartridge-based games, the third Disk System. Each one has this amazing slipcover featuring sprite art from the games included. Opening them up, we get each of the games nestled and displayed with a plaque. This is the kind of treatment I love to see video games get. This almost looks like something you'd see in the Football Hall of Fame, but way cooler. Like, oh, that's the football Malcolm Butler intercepted in the Super Bowl? Like, who gives a shit, dude? That's fucking Dig Dug! Now, this collection doesn't include 2 specific titles, Mobile Suit Z Gundam Hot Scramble and Second Super Robot Wars. The former being a limited 2,000 copy print run giveaway to owners of a Gundam game on GameCube, the latter being just a straight up purchase bonus for another GameCube game, and buy that game, get this one. These ones were released later on after the initial Famicom miniseries wrapped up, but I'm happy with just these. They've been some of my most wanted collectibles for a while now. I've always loved the look of them, and on top of that, they're functional. I have practically the entire Famicom Mini collection by owning these. I can get used to this whole owning thing again.
Well, that worked. I'm gonna need more stuff to talk about for the coming weeks, though.
Yeah.
It's
No.
Hey y'all, Scott here. Happy Sweetest Day weekend! Sweetest Day is a celebration of having a second day to rub into the face of virginity. Think of it as an Ohioan variation of Valentine's Day, but in October. If you already thought October was scary, try mating. Apparently, it's only observed in the Great Lakes region. Well, here I am in Lake Erie.
I count, bitch.
So let's celebrate a pointless retread of an already pointless holiday. If you need an analogy, it's like cleaning your bathtub. Well, for a holiday all about love and affection, I think I'll dabble in being lonely and horny. Question, have you ever been so horny that you bought a Wii game? Oni Chambra.
Dude! This is so sexy! Oni Chambra is a series of hack and slash games that prides itself on being one of those games. Listen, I don't just not understand it, I respect it. You know, I've heard about this series, but not a ton, and it's obvious why. It's pretty much been dormant in North America outside of just a few localizations. It started on the PlayStation 2, the first game titled Simple 2000 Series, Volume 61, the Oni Chambra.
Why, yes, I do know why it's called that. All true video game fans know it, and I do too. It's simple, understandable, it's practically overstandable. It was a series of budget games released by D3 publisher in Japan.
Now that first game did make it to Europe under the title Zombie Zone. Where's my passport? The series has had a more consistent track record getting released in Europe compared to here.
Anything you want to say?
The first one we got was on the Xbox 360 titled Oni Chambra Bikini Samurai Squad, which got a sequel on Wii, Oni Chambra Bikini Zombie Slayers. They released the same day. You know, for its localization, they really changed things up and removed an E. We gotta bring this over to America. What do we change about this image?
Too many letters!
Both got pretty poor reviews, though surprisingly the Wii one did a bit better. I saw this on a few worst of 2009 lists for the Wii specifically, which made it hard for my mom to buy me the game.
I don't know, GameSpot gave it a 3.
But the series is still going strong with consistent enough worldwide releases like Oni Chambra Z2 Chaos on PS4. You know, for pre-ordering the game, you could get the DLC Costume Strawberry Banana Surprise. Can I show this? Well, I can show the disc, damn it. I've been on a roll playing some of the worst games of all time. I beat Ride to Hell Retribution, so what's Oni Chambra for the Wii gonna do to me? That. I wish there was an incognito mode. Warning, this game contains scenes of explicit violence and gore.
But just the right amount of punch!
Well, here we are. If we stay on the title screen long enough, a video plays. We tolerated this quality in 09? You think this 120p video is enough to turn me on? Well, lucky you, I have a slow metabolism. Let's fucking do this! Look at all these settings. We can change the blood color. Oh, this game is so sexy! We can choose between Aya and Saki. Let's pick her, and Jesus Christ, the time starts before you even jump in!
Oh, I gotta get started!
We get some background in the form of a credit scroll with a static image in the background, but it does quite a lot to make me realize these are real beings.
Like, think about this. These people have social security numbers.
They didn't spring on the English voice acting, but that's okay. They made sure to make up for it with 5 minutes of mute credit scroll.
It'll take a lot for that to go down.
On to the gameplay, in which we have to waggle the Wii remote and nunchuck to attack. Oh no! To anybody that automatically dismisses all things motion control, you're a coward, alright? Motion control is one of the biggest core innovations in video games within the past 20 years. The problem is, this is the main thing people think it's all about. Now, would it be better if the attacks were handled by buttons? Yes. But this works okay. It's fairly responsive, and my arms didn't get tired like I thought they would.
Wait, what the hell? I'm not horny, I'm just satisfied.
That is until randomly, I can't kill the enemies anymore. I don't know what's going on. Turns out, the more you kill, the more blood you have to wipe off your sword, and if it gets to be too much, it won't work. In what world does the amount of blood on a blade affect its stabbing ability?
Try again!
It's weird because you can always wipe the blood off your blade. It's easy to, and it's quick. You can wipe it off when the blood level is full, so it's not like, oh, you messed up, game over! If your sword is filled with blood, it's just like, just wipe it off, no big deal. So it's not annoying, it's just more so like, why is this mechanic here? So this first chapter takes me roughly 15 minutes to get through. At chapter 2, like a minute and a half or so. We go from a graveyard to some churchy vibes, a hospital station square. Dude! Sonic Adventure was the first 3D Sonic game because people can't count. This is the GameCube version, Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut, which I always thought was a fun pun. You know, the Director X Cut. That was the only form of joy I got from this game for years. Station Square is sort of our hub world and an excuse to stop playing Oni Chambra. It's one of the few things it's really good at.
Okay, fine. We'll go back to playing Diet Sex.
My god, this game is far tamer than you'd imagine. The zombie slayers are in bikinis, so congratulations, your title's a checklist. The gameplay isn't anything special by any means, it's just a button masher or an elbow fucker. It's just a poor man's Bayonetta for when you want to see half-naked women. Just get to the end of each stage, slaying all the zombies, and that's it. If you play as a different character, you get different scenarios in the same environments we've already played in, but I'll give them that. Variety is the spice of life, and so are ass cracks, so this game has it all. However, on the gameplay and horniness front, it falls a little flat. I can't lie to everybody, you notice. The gameplay is serviceable, but repetitive and uninteresting. The horniness? My god, man, I've gotten more juiced up eating bread. Oh! Which isn't much of an insult. But for a game like this, I'm expecting sheer absurdity, surprisingly good gameplay, both, or just a flat out bad game. This gave me none of that.
Which is why, concerning the holiday, I'm about to give you 5 better games to replace the act of mating. First up at number 5, Bart Simpson Fun Pack. Number 4, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. F you if you had sex instead of playing that game. Number 3, going to Bass Pro Shop. Can you tell I'm single? Number 2, Snoopy's Silly Sports Spectacular, also known in Japan as Donald Duck. And finally, at number 1, Rats for Game Boy Color. This game disappointed the hell out of me. It wasn't surprisingly good, it wasn't memorably bad, it wasn't even sexy enough. It just left me feeling empty on Sweetest Day, which, who could have expected that? Now what? Wanna go to Bass Pro Shop? This is Bass Pro Shop, your one-stop shop to making up for not giving a shit about Oni Chambra. Is why they're still in business. You'd think it's all about fishing and hunting, but no, they sell all kinds of things here, like magazines. Bugs, salt, and guns are my 3 favorite things. Put them all together, it's all over. There's so much damn food here. Fish fryers, hot sauce, Bass Pro Shop soup, socks, the ultimate wolf socks to be exact. Hell, even moon pies. I'm a country boy, damn it. Look at the ambiance. This puts me in the perfect mindset of, that's right, I do want to fucking kill those things. The Cabela's Action playset, if you want to use your imagination, pretend you're hauling a boat. Anything's possible here, but not everything's possible. So here's my Bass Pro Shop haul. First up, I bought bear spray. Helps get a bear away from ya. Or you could just shoot it. Fruit roll-up trays. I love the candy. Ground meat freezer bags. Bear bell. Attached to belt or pack when hiking, camping, or fishing in bear country. I guess it makes it easier for a bear to find you. Hot sauce. Pleasure and pain. Oni Chambra was a fluke. I had to make up for it somehow. Uncle Buck shredded jerky chew. Wait, that is shoe shine, alright. We can wash down accidentally consuming shoe shine with some moon pies. You know the old saying, pop on a huck hat. I think they forgot a Y. And finally show off my synthetic raccoon urine. Of course you may say, Jesus, Scott, really? Synthetic raccoon piss? And to that I say, don't worry. The fox one is real. Well, that's how I spend my sweetest day. Maybe next Valentine's Day we can play something a little more lewd. But in the meantime, I hope I showed you that it's okay to be alone in times like this. And just focus on yourself and your hobbies. And eventually, you'll find your right person, and it'll all make sense. Not me, though. I'll stick to ignorance. Hey y'all, Scott here. Well, I've run out of physical goods to talk about in my apartment. The bank repossessed everything else. Don't worry, I'll figure it out next week. I might slip the bank at 20. So I don't have anything left to talk about outside of who gives a shit. And I got 8 minutes out of that, so I think I'll turn to drugs. Piracy, the gateway drug. I'm playing Mario 3 on my Mac. This time next week, you'll find me in a fucking ditch.
What do you do when you can't buy and or play a game anymore? Give up! It's one of our 2 rights, to buy video games and not to. Well, that's fair enough, but man, I just really want to play Four Swords Adventures and I don't have a GameCube right now, so maybe just this once.
I also killed a man.
Emulation is often a word in the video game world with dirty connotations associated with it. It's like the word gimmick. That thing was forever ruined by the Wii and Kinect for Xbox 360. Now people think it's a bad thing. Like everything in gaming is a gimmick when you get down to it, and emulation is something that's been seen as immoral, lazy, pretty much everything under the sun. But what is emulation?
Well, to start, immoral and lazy.
So your video game runs on specific hardware. Good for it. An Xbox game is made to run on an Xbox, but what if you want to bring that game to future consoles? Well, you could port the game, which is taking the game and translating it over to another platform to work there, though that can be a long process. Different systems are different systems, thus they can be incompatible, so getting code made for one game console to run on another, it can be incredibly tricky. There's no getting around that. So sometimes it may be more worthwhile and efficient to use emulation, which emulates specific video game hardware via software on different hardware.
That was the last thing I told my parents before they kicked me out.
Of course, for more complex and newer games, porting is most definitely the superior and often only option. You can fine-tune the game to work perfectly on a new platform, while emulation is more of a quick and dirty jack-of-all-trades solution for older systems. It takes a while to figure out how to code a program that makes a game file think it's running on a game console it was meant to work on, which is why emulation is primarily used for games from older consoles, ones that programmers have pretty much completely figured out at this point. If you're bringing old school NES, Sega Genesis, Atari games to a new platform, these games are so unbelievably simple. Why would you port them? Why would you rebuild them from the ground up? Just use a Sega Genesis emulator. Drag and drop the game files and presto, here's $30 from a fucking idiot. Emulation isn't always perfect. Things can go wrong because each game is created differently. A computer program designed to mimic very specific hardware, well, that's what it's doing. It's mimicking it. It's basically fooling this game file into thinking it's running on a Nintendo 64. So games that use unique effects and push the hardware a decent bit or add something special about them, those are generally outliers. For the longest time, Star Fox, Yoshi's Island, Super Mario RPG, these were SNES games that were really difficult to emulate, and it took a while to perfect SNES emulation to play them properly via this method. While our modern game consoles and computers are more than capable of running games from the Sega Saturn, it comes down to figuring out how to emulate the system properly. Some of these consoles are still incredibly difficult to figure out. Does this look understandable to you? So to wrap up the explanation, how about an analogy? Emulation is like telling a teenager that grape juice is wine. They might get drunk, it just depends on how stupid they are. Well then what's the issues with emulation? It seems like a go-to way to experience older games on newer hardware. Well, for one, the purity. This was the main argument I heard growing up. The idea that playing a classic game with an emulator, it doesn't count. If you play a game on anything but the original hardware, you didn't really play it. Yeah, the guy saying that also left the bathroom without washing his hands. So something along the lines of playing an NES game on your computer. You're not supposed to use the keyboard for these games. Yet nobody cares if you use a controller for computer games. Let's say something like the Nintendo Switch. If I play Zelda 2 on here, it's not the same experience. You're using a different controller. You're playing the game in a context that the game designers didn't even intend on. You're not playing the game correctly. And hey, I totally get it. Back in the day, I downloaded Super Mario Kart for the SNES on the Wii Virtual Console, and after playing it, I was just like, well, that definitely was the first Mario Kart, alright. I just couldn't see why many still held it in such high regards, though later on, I popped the official cartridge into an actual Super Nintendo and played with an authentic controller, and it clicked. Everything just felt right. The game was meant to be played this way, and because of that, it was way more fun. I think playing old school games like that with a modern controller can kind of give me whiplash. Like, it makes me feel like, man, I could be playing Mario Kart 8 on this thing right now, and instead I'm playing this piece of shit. Playing on the original hardware helps in understanding what the game is trying to achieve. It allows you to immerse yourself in the context of playing the game as it was intended. That's not to say I can't enjoy old games on new platforms. Far from it. I prefer it. It's so much more convenient. It's just playing with the actual cartridge and system and controller. It just feels right. Playing an NES game on Switch makes me ask, what the hell am I doing with my life? Playing an NES game on an actual NES with an original controller, it feels like you're appreciating history. It's like listening to vinyl. Sure, it's more effort to do it that way, but it feels so much more genuine. However, emulation does have a ton of benefits, one being video output. It can look a million times better than most conventional ways of playing on the original system. Yes, I do like to see the game. Pixel perfect visuals, it's so crisp now. This is horrible for Atari. You ever play any of these Atari compilations when they're in crystal clear HD and it just makes you realize how stupid you feel while playing these games? Guess what I'm playing with an Xbox controller. Why, yes, I'm fucking stupid. These games can run on milk jugs. There's no reason why they shouldn't be available on modern consoles, though I still think they work best hooked up to an old TV with a fuzzy picture. Like, come on, this doesn't look right. Some games just work best with limitations like that. When you're given all the options in the world to make Super Breakout your own, it almost kind of ruins the fun in that game. And that's how many people feel about the added bonus features that come with many emulators. Save stage, you can save and resume wherever you want in the game. You don't have to wait for a moment in the title itself. It's a system-wide feature. Just save and the emulator holds your place and you can pick up exactly where you left off. And some consider this cheating. I consider it an open relationship. Here's the thing. Do you really think most of the developers chose not to include save files in their games? Or do you really think they knew back then what an adequate amount of save points would be if they did have save files? I think this is mainly an argument from retro gamers who feel games have gotten too easy these days, but does that easiness stem from being able to save? It's more of just something that deserves to be there. Like, imagine a DVD player without a pause button because, well, you couldn't pause the movie in the theater. So the fact these emulators include saving options, that's not right. You gotta play through the game as it was intended. Are you guys really acting like you never got help playing games in the 80s and 90s? Are you really acting like you didn't look at maps and guides in Nintendo Power, or acting like you didn't get help from friends on the schoolyard, or use Game Genie to mess around with the games or input cheat codes? Bottom line, if you don't want to use save states, good for you, but who the hell cares? They're nothing but a good option to have, though I think the main argument is about abusing them. You can save your game right before a super tough part and just keep reloading that save point until you get it right. Hey, to be fair, if you abuse save states and use them constantly, chances are you're gonna save state yourself into a corner. Like, you save at a part where a billion projectiles are already on their way to you, and once you load at the save point, bam!
Oh, I am scum.
I find myself using save states not because I can't do what the game is asking me to. I just don't want to put up with its garbage. I don't want to waste time playing through a bunch of levels I've already been without save states all over again just to get to one part of the game I have trouble with. Hey, that's a part of the game design if you have to replay levels, but in many of these cases, I'm not trying to beat the game for a sense of accomplishment. I just want to beat it to experience it. So I think save states are fine if used in moderation. Rewinding is for bitches! Another staple of emulators is the rewind functionality, being able to rewind from wherever you are to wherever you were. Who would use this? Bitches. This is pretty much an easier to use save state and was born out of the fact a lot of these retro games are just unfair. Yeah, try saying that in court. Hey, I 100% think this is being a bit cheap sometimes, but my god, it's so hard to ignore. I'll play a game for a while before using it, but then there's that one portion where I'm just like, okay, I beat everything up to this point. I can obviously do it. It's just, let me use it to get past this. And then I proceed to use it for the rest of the game. It's so evil, but it's such a nice quality of life improvement. Ah! What about the fast forward feature? The Sega Genesis Classics collection has that. Helps me die way sooner. You can consistently change and add filters and change how the game looks with emulation. Some people like the pixels all smoothed out. Some things like the pixels all smoothed out. Oh, look at that, a CRT filter, making it look like it's on an old TV. I understand the value in something like this. These types of monitors are what these games were designed for, though filters like this feel very patronizing to me. Like, what do you think, I'm a fucking idiot? No, I need the pixel smooth, stretched widescreen, mirrored image, TV projection, plus a CRT filter? Can you tell I have standards? Button mapping. You can change where the buttons are. I think this is a feature that should be standard on literally everything. Like, why do I have to hit the A button for this? Why not the X button? Why not the L button, for Christ's sake? Sure, some games are fully designed around where the button is. I remember Heavy Rain, when the character would be in stressful situations where you had to carefully move between dangerous objects. You'd have to hold multiple buttons in awkward places, which really immersed me. All right, that's enough sucking Heavy Rain off. Some button placements just don't work for people, especially when you're emulating a game from a different console. That controller may not be up to snuff. So being able to change that, I think, is important. Sure, many of these additions may make the game feel less and less as it originally did, but is that really a bad thing? More often than not, most emulation efforts give you solutions to play the game nearly just as it was always intended, if not entirely. If you don't want to play with save states, rewind features, widescreen, any of that, you don't have to! But these features can only really help the games. Many times emulators can in fact reduce slowdown, increase frame rate, enable 16:9 so you can see what the hell is going on here. And of course that raises questions. Slowdown stinks, but that was how the game was made. If you take the slowdown out of Sonic 2, is it still Sonic 2? Might be a dumb question, but what about for stuff like speedruns, competitions? Using these enhanced versions should always be specified. But at what point do these additive enhancements become too much? The benefits emulators bring, they would have been enough to make this version of a game its own separate game back then. Bottom line, emulation seems pretty simple, but the more you go down it, there's hundreds upon hundreds of questions that have yet to get definitive answers. And a lot of it is completely down to your own individual opinion. Like, I think Nintendo 64 games in widescreen look disgusting. I don't like them, but do I care that other people do and they only ever want to play Nintendo 64 games like this? No. But so many people do. It's like they get really mad if somebody says they beat Mega Man 2, but on an emulator they go, no, I beat Mega Man 2. What, do NBA fans get pissed off when they see somebody play on the playground? Who cares? Play games the way you want to play games, and if that means playing via emulation on your fancy new controller with save states, or if that means playing on the original hardware, so be it. There's nothing wrong.
I'm still in prison, aren't I?
Yes, one of the biggest problems with emulation is the legality of it. Now, the stuff I've been referring to up to this point have all been mostly relegated to official emulation, games officially made available by the legal copyright owners on video game hardware. Nintendo's Virtual Console, or NES, SNES, Nintendo 64 Switch Online services, Sega's various Genesis collections, Sony's PlayStation 1 games on PS3 and Vita, and all the other collections and re-releases. The mini consoles like the NES and SNES Classic Edition, PlayStation Classic, Sega Genesis Mini, they all use emulation to provide you with an experience as close to the original games as possible, mostly. But that's not even half the story with emulation, as most of it occurs on my worst fucking nightmare. Some of it happens on Mac, what are you talking about? All those emulator features that I discussed, it's completely up in the air if they appear on official video game consoles, and most of the time, they don't. You're lucky if you get a CRT filter. Emulators on PC are decades ahead, and have been for a while. You can truly do anything with them. Play fan games, ROM hacks, use custom save files to get farther in the game without playing. You can toggle between dozens of options on the fly. Plus, having choices. You can pick and choose what emulator for what system you want to use, and you can play any way you want. Games are games. Everybody has their own rules for Monopoly. Why can't Super Mario Bros. 3 be the same? I own this game. I should be able to do whatever I want with it. And if I want the frog suit in World 1-1, that's my own business. It's so frustrating with many official releases that they don't give you the options fan emulators give. Super Mario 3D All-Stars included emulated versions of Super Mario 64 and Sunshine. Sunshine was put in 16:9 widescreen, while 64 was still 4:3, which I still don't understand. Yes, I don't like Nintendo 64 games in widescreen, but even I don't get this. It's more than possible. Fans have been doing this for years. Just the option would have been cool. It's all about control. Nintendo wants their experiences on their platforms to be a certain way. It seems like they want playing a Nintendo system to be like walking into Disneyland. Like, you've entered the world of Nintendo. Do you want to toggle off bilinear filters? They don't want that. We're lucky we're at the point we are with them. Emulators themselves on PC aren't illegal, but they're pretty much worthless unless you have game ROM files to play on them, and the only way to do that is to serve 6 to 7 years. This is the main crutch of PC emulation, obtaining the games to play. Yeah, by all means do it. I'm sure the core would love to hear your story. Piracy, that's the main argument. You're downloading game files illegally to play on your computer. Well, what if I own a legal copy of the game? Then can I do it? Nope! These are two separate copies. Owning one hose reel doesn't give you the legal right to steal another. However, who the hell cares? Most of these games aren't being sold anymore. There's no official way to buy them. The only method is getting a copy secondhand on eBay, and that's not going to any of the original copyright holders. It's an incredibly tricky thing to figure out. So much of this is in a legal gray area, or is in a specifically illegal area, but you're not hurting any profits or anybody or anything by dabbling in it, or is in a legal area, but you can't do anything with it. Sure, you can get an emulator, but playing games on it, no thank you. But these emulators, man, even if you can play a legal copy of a game on a legal system easily, emulators like Dolphin can give you GameCube and Wii games in far greater resolutions with new control options, better frame rates. It's difficult to look at this compared to the official, completely legal method and really consider this better.
However, we need to make things clear. Emulation on PC can be a nightmare. You know how much work it took me to play the Wii version of Sonic Colors on the PC? Enough to say, F you, I'll buy Sonic Colors Ultimate instead. The amount of work required to get a lot of this running is ridiculous. Even the easiest ones, the types of websites you have to go on to download ROMs, are the ones my mom always warned me about. Half the time, the emulator doesn't work and you don't know why, and if anything, it just goes to show that putting out simply emulated versions of old games on consoles officially, it still takes a lot of work. And while fan emulation can be outstanding, at the end of the day, I'd rather just officially purchase the games on the consoles when they become available by the copyright holders because, frankly, I'm too lazy and stupid to break the law.
And it makes it all worse that companies like Nintendo are so hell-bent on putting a stop to anything of this nature. But you know what? They have the right to do so. They don't want their games to be pirated. But if they don't want that, offer your damn games on your system. Nintendo re-releases their games all the time, but they're mostly the same things over and over again. What about the games that never get a re-release? The Virtual Boy catalog, or even more so, the Satellaview games. Games broadcast to the add-on for the Super Famicom in Japan only. These games were only available for a certain amount of time, have never been re-released, and are preserved online through emulation. And that's something emulation does, and it does well. Preservation, and the stance against emulation has hurt it significantly. Whether it's because the idea of emulation isn't the true experience, that if you emulate games you're not truly playing them, or the legal battles against them, or just the fact that if an official video game re-release uses emulation, it's somewhat frowned upon, it doesn't matter. Emulation has a weird stigma. When I hear that a re-release was emulated, it usually is considered just emulation, like it's a bad thing. Oh no, this collection of games was merely emulated. They weren't ported natively to the platform. You do realize nobody notices most of the time? I gladly welcome more effort, but sometimes emulation works perfectly. There's no need to go further than that, and complaining about it is just another excuse to complain about some games. No, they just emulated it. Well, that's not always a bad thing. Some remasters or remakes of games, I'd honestly prefer it if they just re-released an emulated version of the original. That way I know exactly what I'm getting. Emulation can be bad sometimes, 100%. There's kind of a one-size-fits-all mentality with it. Emulating a console, one game may work great for it, others may not. But like I said, even bad emulation, most of the time people don't notice. Sonic Jam on the Sega Saturn rebuilt the original Genesis games from the ground up. They fixed slowdown and improved the games here and there, but they primarily felt the exact same. Sonic Mega Collection used emulated versions. Most people never noticed, I'm telling you now. Still doesn't stop Sega from constantly putting effort into finding new ways to re-release Sonic 1. Am I the only one that gets kinda pissed off at the amount of man hours put into re-releasing this game? Oh, the Sega Ages version of Sonic 1 is so much better than the version in the Sega Genesis Classics collection. It's the same damn game. I normally prefer my games pretty stock. I don't like to mess with the visuals or controls too much, but that doesn't mean I think the option shouldn't be there for those who don't want that. And while I prefer to play games on console, emulation on PC is a situation where you can't really blame people for doing it. It's the superior option in many ways, and I'm worried that the stance against it just keeps it from being the asset it's meant to be. This is supposed to help gaming, to help more people experience it, to help preserve it, to help people play games the way they want to play them. And companies going after stuff like this, or people frowning upon official releases using emulation when it's completely warranted to use it, it just keeps retro gaming way more inaccessible than it needs to be. Plus, who the hell actually went to jail over downloading a ROM? At the end of the day, just do what you want.
Gotcha.
Best of two.
No, I've given you more than enough chances. One.
And you weren't willing to be my bitch.
I wasn't gonna make an exception for you. You never paid your bills, and as a bank, we have to treat everybody the same. It's our sworn duty to everyone over.
Come on, give me a break. Come on, I saved your wife from getting shot.
She's a convicted serial killer.
How can you expect me to get out of debt? I can't be employed. I'm unemployed.
You act like it's a religion.
More or less a kink.
Listen, you pay us back by tomorrow, you can have your stuff back.
How about you take this and we call it even?
I don't want your bribe.
I'll give you a 5 to want it.
Just go out there and make some money. It's so simple. Just start a successful business that sells a product that the market grows every day and there's not enough stores out there for it. A product that's everywhere that no one has. A product that'll never go out of style. Keep it cheap, cost effective, and on a budget.
Hey y'all, Scott here. I got 4 words, 3 syllables, and 1 mistake for you. Ghost for sale. Located at Fleeting Smiles Cemetery by Death Productions, you will need a membership to get in. Come on down and we'll set you up with a ghost. Try to find a store that's not Dollar Tree, do that. Act now and we'll give you a fresh ghost.
The dev market is huge, and I did the math. This is the hottest spot for it. So many damn ghosts who all need homes. These guys have been in stock for eons, things that have died ages ago, like Scott's financial stability. Everybody dabbles in debt at some point. You can't tell me that this isn't the best way to repay the entirety of my debt in a day, and if you do, stop. It's time for the customers to line up. It is happy hour. I need this, I really do. I just want my stupid Nintendo games back. I deserve infertility. I just need to tip the edge off before my first big sale. But wait. Oh boy! Bullshit!
This is a tale of video game franchises that just wouldn't stay dead. You thought you could sleep well knowing Streets of Rage would never come back? It's been a tough year. Not everything lasts forever until it does again. Some gaming franchises will forever stand the test of time. There will always be a new iteration of Tetris, Mario, and Pokemon on the way because they aren't narc. These games will always sell. There's always a place for them. After Pokemon Blue, they said, well, we can't just stop there. But not every franchise is this lucky. Not all of them are surefire hits, and thus, they get shelved, buried, forgotten for years on end. Until it's time to play God. A revival, taking a dormant series and acting like nothing ever changed. It's Crash Bandicoot 4, the 8th game, 12 years later. Now, what constitutes as a revival? No, not this, that's just necrophilia. The terms reboot and revival are interchanged quite a bit, but I consider a reboot to be a fresh start, ignoring most of what came before and being something primarily made to appeal to newcomers. A revival is just that, it's picking up where the last game left off, let's say around 10 years ago. I feel like too many fans get antsy if it's been a year without a new game in their favorite franchise. In 2011, people were acting like Mega Man needed a revival when we just got Mega Man 10 the year prior. Now, to be fair, many Mega Man projects were being canceled around this time. Fans were worried, but there was no reason to be. Now, 6 years later, I'll give you that, but games are taking longer and longer to develop. There used to be a 6-year gap at the longest between mainline Elder Scrolls and Grand Theft Auto titles. Tell me more, Grandpa. So what, would Elder Scrolls 6 be considered a revival? Contra 4 was, and that came out 3 years after the last one. Well, I think the only way we can consider a game to be a revival is if it passes the Who test. Who? A series that, by most means, was forgotten by the time they decided to bring it back. XCOM was such an old PC-only series that died out by the early 2000s until they decided to bring it back in 2011. Fallout 3 released in 2008 with the last numbered entry launching a decade prior, and I guarantee you most people who bought these games never even heard of the original titles. While XCOM can be considered more of a reboot, Fallout 3 was exactly that, the next mainline entry in the Fallout series. This was a big deal, and with its insane critical and commercial success, it showcased that Dead series could have more life than initially thought. Rock Band 4.
Ow, my face! I use that at cemeteries!
Oh my god, I'm sorry!
Hey, watch it.
Oh, well, what brings you to the cemetery?
Just looking.
Oh, could I interest you in a ghost? We offer different sizes.
Nah, I already have a gun. I was just interested in a job.
Same, that's why I have one.
Come on, I got let go from my mail route for gross negligence.
Oh, come on! You're not gross.
I really need this, please. It was my childhood dream to bounce back after getting fired.
Okay, well, what are your qualifications?
So I like fucking lizards. Not like fucking lizards, but like fucking lizards. Also, I'm pretty skilled to give you back this book.
You are so good at this.
2015 was the dawn of the dead for music peripheral games. Activision put a stop to all things Guitar Hero in early 2011 after declining sales, and Rock Band followed suit shortly after. The market was simply oversaturated with music games that cost over $100 that are the reasons landfills are so in right now. The Earth wasn't meant to house these things. There's only so many plastic music peripheral games you can release in a year. 11, it's only 11. These games were all fundamentally copies of each other, just with different song lists, but nearly all of them would be a bitch to swallow. Customers were overwhelmed by the amount on store shelves and eventually lost interest in nabbing every single one that came out. People bought Guitar Hero 3, then got the 4th one after that, but asking them to get 6 that year was too much. So, the 2 series and the genre as a whole, capital punishment it is. That was until 2015, when Activision and Harmonix both decided it was time. The revivals of Guitar Hero and Rock Band were strange considering I think everybody missed these games to some extent, but nobody wanted to invest in them again. They take up too much space, they're far more expensive than regular games, and while Guitar Hero Live is definitely more of a reboot with a newly designed controller, live action backgrounds, and being a far worse game than the originals, Rock Band 4 picked up right where Rock Band 3 left off, which means, yes, it's in the same timeline as LEGO Rock Band. Rock Band 4 was pretty much just more Rock Band again. It's hard to deny this is what fans wanted. But the series was a little too dead to make a full-blown recovery. By 2015, purchasing large plastic accessories wasn't cool anymore.
What?
While the original sets for both of these series hold their value online, nobody dares to want Guitar Hero Live. Rock Band 4 fared quite a bit better with it being just a flat-out new rock band. It may not have lit sales charts on fire, but it's been getting updates and new DLC for years. It's like feeding a grave. These revivals showcase that not everything works as well as it did back in the day, regardless if barely anything's changed or anti-barely. But then we have a series like Donkey Kong Country's comeback with Donkey Kong Country Returns. The whole continent? Donkey Kong Country was a reboot in of itself as it took Donkey Kong from the arcades and made something far more substantial out of it.
Well, that's a good place to end off for now.
The beginning of chapter 2?
Yeah, we might as well do inventory. It has been 8 minutes.
Alright, we got 14 billion ghosts and a bunch of spider mice.
Okay, and how much did we make?
0. That's 0 more than yesterday! We have a customer!
Ghost, huh? Are they chipped?
No,
Oh, they're gone!
You gotta chip the ghost! I should know. My brother's really dead.
You know, he could be a good addition to the team. He seems to know what the word ghost means. You like hearing words?
After the trilogy on Super Nintendo and a one-night stand on Nintendo 64, the Donkey Kong series got weird. Only just then. From the early to late 2000s, Donkey Kong only received oddball spin-offs like the DK series, King of Swing and Jungle Climber. Anybody else think this game doesn't exist? Why can't more people be like DK Jungle Climber, non-existent, we have an overpopulation problem? They decided to make some Donkey Kong games that work with the DK Bongos peripheral, Donkey Konga 1 through 3. Yep, it was officially on a spree. Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, which was definitely more of a traditional DK game. No, it depends on your definition of traditional. Yeah, we do this all the time. Donkey Kong Barrel Blast. That's fucked up. A lot of companies do this, where there's no big official entry for the longest time, so they decide to make low-quality spin-offs instead. Like, not only do we hate this franchise, we hate you too. On top of being a series of nothing but spin-offs for a decade, Donkey Kong had a fair amount of canceled titles during this time, which mostly can be attributed to the original Donkey Kong Country developers Rare being bought out by Microsoft, meaning a decent amount of their Donkey Kong games, well, they had to be scrapped or reworked. So for a while, I think Nintendo just didn't really know what to do with DK. To be fair, I don't think most people knew either.
Use words!
This all changed with the Donkey Kong Country series revival, now being developed by Retro Studios. Their founder made the Guy game. Country Returns was a phenomenal resurrection, as its design felt incredibly fresh and new while staying true to the original DKC formula. And I think that's something Retro excelled at, as they did the exact same thing with Metroid, a series that goes in and out of cardiac arrest. Twice already, I've been critical on whether or not the series can conceive, to which it responds, "I'm fertile, bitch." I personally believe Metroid's absences throughout history has less to do with sales and more to do with if Nintendo felt like it that morning. Don't get me wrong, sales definitely play a part. Metroid's never been a huge seller, but you don't put 2 chibi robo games into production during Metroid's hiatus and blame low sales for why there isn't a new game. You funded this? A series may go dormant because of a lack of drive to make a new game. Like Nintendo keeps saying they won't make a new F-Zero unless they have a good idea to back it up. That good idea is just a new F-Zero. Out of the thousands of employees at Nintendo, I think every single one is repulsed by the idea of making a new game.
That's what you call a corpse?
My dead brother's corpse was awesome. That's too far.
well, it's a learning experience. What else are we gonna do at the cemetery?
Well, there's a Del Taco.
That sounds amazing.
Come on, we cannot support a competing business. We sell dead people.
Yep.
As a resident carcass expert, I say we mimic the Del Taco strategy.
I already have the papers written out.
No, he has a point. Everybody goes to Del Taco till f***ing die.
What we need is a marketing guy to point us in the right direction. And we need better ads.
So, Terry Lessler, we know you've run your own pumpkin orchard. How well can you market?
You want this?
Yeah!
You're hired.
The long absence of a series can be a detriment towards sales of a revival, but it can also be a huge plus. Half the time, a revival's entire existence is plagued by, finally, it's a brand new Super Monkey Ball game. Did they forget to turn on spell check? It's the first 2D Metroid in 19 years. Is that something to brag about? To be fair, I don't think games like Streets of Rage 4 would have had the same impact if they released during the series' original run. Time allowed for people to truly understand how much they missed this series, because without it, I don't think a new Streets of Rage was at the top of anybody's bets for the year. I lost so much money in 2018, but when it released, this felt like such a necessary game. They knocked it out of the park. It's so fluid, so beautiful, so much fun. And selling over 2.5 million units, I think it just goes to show how well a faithful revival crafted out of love for the franchise can do. In contrast, what about franchises that haven't had a game in a while, so the companies say, buy this new game, and you might see them again? This isn't a revival, it's a hostage situation. Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz HD. Who wanted this? Oh, of course. This was the first console Monkey Ball in years, and it just wasn't the best game in the series. Far from it. It was where the game started to truly go downhill. So Sega decided to remaster that one. Great! Remakes and remasters can be fantastic solutions to bring back dead series. It pleases fans who just want to see their favorite thing with a new logo attached, and it helps companies figure out if it's worth pumping money into a wholly new game, just like it going from Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy to Crash Bandicoot 4. But it still feels kinda grimy to almost blackmail fans into buying a game they don't want just to get games they do want. At least with Contra, they gave us both options: the Contra Anniversary Collection or Contra Rogue Corps. I like that they advertised this collection right after whatever the f this is got announced. Marketing. Please, God, don't be pissed.
So after all that, sketched out a marketing plan?
I'm a resident corpse R&D.
And I have seniority.
Alright, so after hiring 3 employees and making no sales, our profit is... I need to hire an accountant.
Hey, look alive, first customer.
Ooh, ghost store, eh? It's about time somebody gave Del Taco a run for their money.
What are you doing at the cemetery?
Bro, I've been getting so goddamn religious lately.
Oh, what religion?
The real one.
Target.
I've been getting really invested in the culture of my religion lately, but the word culture kind of rhymes with vulture, so I don't really like it. I've just been calling it a cult.
Well, if you decide to buy a ghost today, 100% of our customers today were involved in a cult.
See, I'm just a small cub in a big pond. One day I might be able to learn my cult's resurrection techniques, but for now the whole concept is foreign to me. Like, I don't even know how to begin to resurrect a being.
You ever wait for a series to come back and it's just... A continuation of Half-Life 2 was one of the biggest ongoing jokes in gaming. Like, it needed to happen. It just needed to. Here's a VR prequel 13 years later. Thanks, Sean! Disregarding the high critical praise of Alex, it's just bizarre and pretty deflating to wait over a decade to see what happens next, when what you get is a dirty prequel. Like, damn it! I didn't want to learn more about the Half-Life universe, I wanted to learn more! And you want to talk about less than ideal reveal situations. What about telling the fans to do it themselves? Many revivals occurred via crowdfunding websites, as there's a reason these series were dead to begin with. Shenmue 3 released 18 years after its predecessor. How did this series not have menopause? Shenmue wasn't revived because companies saw potential in sales figures. It's one of those franchises that everybody said, damn, we need another Shenmue, when 95% of the people saying that never played Shenmue and never wanted to play Shenmue. It was just something they heard that fans wanted and it became the big gaming thing to request. Like, we need a new Star Fox. Do we? We all just keep looking at new things to request, even if it's something we don't care about. How many people screaming at Nintendo for a new F-Zero actually want one? Many don't know what they really want because people will talk and talk and talk about needing a brand new Crash Bandicoot game. Like, I need companionship. Crash 4 was interesting as it shows just how far using a number can take you. These people must really mean business if they're willing to flunk math. So you have the first 3 games on PlayStation, then Crash 4 on PlayStation 2, The Wrath of Cortex. It wasn't numbered Crash 4 here, though it was in Japan. Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time, disregards all games following the third on PlayStation. It's like the Halloween movies. You have the first one, then a sequel to it, then a third that has absolutely no connections, the fourth is a sequel to the second, then the seventh disregards everything after the second one with a sequel to it, then the ninth one is a reboot with its own sequel, followed up by the 11th one, which is a sequel to the first movie, disregarding even the second one, which got its own sequels. It's just like Crash Bandicoot. Have you ever heard that? A game that called itself the fourth entry to later on have another game consider itself to be the fourth entry? Who the hell cares? Double Dragon 4. What happened here? So you have Double Dragon 1 through 3 on NES and in arcades, and Super Double Dragon on Super Nintendo, then Double Dragon 5 on Super Nintendo. It's obvious Super Double Dragon is Double Dragon 4. It's a beat 'em up like the first 3. 5 was a fighting game, so run. But this was the fourth game, even if it wasn't named it. After 2003, Double Dragon was fairly dormant until Double Dragon Neon in 2012, which was more or less a reboot by Way Forward. I remember fans enjoying it and IGN giving it a 3. This is exactly what was expected from a Double Dragon game, but it's nothing like Uncharted. 5 years later, Double Dragon 4 was released. How? We were up to 5, so you go back one? To be fair, Double Dragon 4 seems to be a revival of the trilogy released on NES, even though the games originated in the arcade. I'm sure this style of Double Dragon is what most remember. Does not explain Double Dragon 2 releasing in 2013 and having nothing to do with Double Dragon 2. Even the subtitles are different. Man, I'm having a really Double Dragon 2 and 4 kind of day, which is to say... Oh, that's f***ing blood! Okay, so I guess this is a reboot, this is a remake, and this is a revival of a series that was already in remission. Obviously, I don't plead the fifth. It's always strange to see a series do a reboot, instilling a completely new continuity, to just end up going back to the original series. Prince of Persia got a reboot, then another reboot to just end up going back to the first reboot, the Sands of Time series. Strange they decided to revive this series only 2 years after the reboot, 5 years after the last Sands of Time game. Not so strange this coincided with a film adaptation of the Sands of Time. Can this really be considered a revival? I mean, it was 2 years since the last game, and only 5 years since the last game in the series that was revived. Give me one chance to raise the dead, I'm bringing back Garfield. I missed the comic I read this morning. Devil May Cry had a similar fate, receiving a reboot in 2013 titled DMC Devil May Cry, only to get a revival later on, a true fifth entry, Devil May Cry 5, in 2019, 11 years after the fourth. The return of the original series definitely showed that there is such a thing as too consumer friendly, that stripping a series down just to make a reboot for wide appeal can be detrimental. I don't know anybody who refused to play any of the other Devil May Crys, but when DMC came out, bam, finally, a black-haired protagonist. 5 ended up being the most successful game in the series, which shows that sometimes it's good to give the fans what they want. Sometimes, in name only. Sonic the Hedgehog 4 was set to be this grand revival of classic Sonic. I mean, come on, it's in the title. Well, when you put it like that. This was a complete crock. Literally just a budget Sonic game made for mobile, repositioned as a home console, returned to form. Just what the hell were you resurrecting exactly? The Antichrist? This plays nothing like classic Sonic and the Genesis, but various outlets considered fans who didn't like the new physics and design of the game to be typical Sonic fans, not actually knowing what they want. They'll complain about anything. But in reality, Sonic 4 was a two-faced backstabbing revival. Sega acted like this is what everybody wanted, right? And those who couldn't care less went, yes! It's like the people who kept asking for Star Fox, like, look where that got us. Again, I feel like a lot of people in gaming online just know about highly requested titles and chime in to request sequels themselves, even if they truly don't care.
So you?
I like to request games that fans want because I truly want to see people get the games they've wanted for ages. Do I really care if there will never be another Chrono game? No, look at me. But I think gaming as a whole would be better with it. But I need to learn to keep my mouth shut if I'm not actually going to buy the damn game.
Oh, so that tells me something needs to be roughly 1 year dead for it to be resurrected? Judging by the Prince of Persia and the Forgotten Sands.
Well, you ready to seal the deal?
Yes! 1 ghost, please.
Wait, he could be a vital member of our team.
He's already in a cult.
But if he could raise the dead, those ghosts would bring glowing testimonials of our work.
We've had no complaints so far.
But it can't hurt. Welcome aboard.
I never even applied!
Though Sonic the Hedgehog 4 was created just to follow the success of Mega Man 9, an actual revival of classic Mega Man, in which during that era, the Mega Man series devolved into nothing but not Mega Man. It's really strange that they basically abandoned the classic Mega Man series and opted for 14 Mega Man Battle Network games during the 2000s. Oh, well then these must be more approachable and popular than regular Mega Man. Huh? Well, Capcom decided to make a 9th classic Mega Man and brought it back down to the visuals from the 6th NES entries. At the time in 2008, this was awesome, and it's still really cool, though it feels a bit strange looking back. You go from this to this. What an upgrade. And that's all fine and good, but they did it again! It's just a strange feeling that they were devaluing what Mega Man was and acting like all Mega Man is 8-bit, which greatly limited how the franchise was perceived. Mega Man 9 and 10 are fantastic, but after that, when the series took another hiatus and came back with Mega Man 11, I think it was for the best that game used a much more modern aesthetic.
Alright, Rex, do your thing.
Oh, okay, so I think I can only resurrect corpses that are about 1 year old. It's my one flaw.
Can we pick who to resurrect? My dead brother's over here. He's pretty cool.
No, okay. At my skill level, they have to be random, and I can really only do resurrections that are already halfway underway.
This was a bad idea. Do not tell my dead brother this. I do not like dead people.
You really think you can shoot a ghost? Ah! You fool. That was just a ghost wound.
Oh, yeah, I forgot I survived a war my dead brother or something.
Ah!
Ah! Ah!
He smells so bad! There's gotta be some info in here.
Usually you'll see companies plan ahead of a full-on revival with new merch and other forms of media. Like, you're willing to fund this and not a new game? They were gonna make a Klonoa movie. When was the last game? I'm sure it'll do fine. Many projects like this are far easier to put together than a whole-ass game. So a Banjo-Kazooie figure, why not? Might as well make some money off of this thing. See, Nintendo, I bought the Captain Falcon amiibo. That shows you that there are people who would buy a new F-Zero. You noticed, right? Many times, revivals resurrect the last damn thing anybody wanted. Instead of an actual game, they do something else. Emphasis on thing. They just resurrected Bubsy because, that's right, laugh, it'll be even funnier if you buy it. I love that Psychonauts 2 was announced via crowdfunding and they were chipping away at it just for the VR side game to release before it. I mean, that kind of took a little steam away from Psychonauts 2 being the grand return, but it's a bit much to complain. I mean, I just wanted one new Psychonauts experience, and instead you gave me two?
Resurrect something else, and it might help us!
I can't go again 5 minutes after a mission.
Go to his cult practice tonight. Dinner's in 30 minutes. Learn his ways, and then we'll have two people who don't know what the f they're doing. Well, I mean, this kind of stuff always happens at night. We wouldn't be at this mess if it wasn't for that damn moon. So it turns out we can't outlaw the moon.
That's it. I'm calling 911.
No. Calling 911 is for pussies. Well, what's his biggest fear? Maybe we could try to scare him off.
He's a corrupt police officer who tried to kill us. His version of hell is a room full of people doing the right thing.
Tap out! Tap out!
At the very least, we had to validate why we did this in the first place.
Yeah, you're right. Sir, how have our services been for you?
He's smelling!
Or we can just chalk this up as a fluke. I think I've got enough left in me to go for another one. That was it.
There's gotta be something in here! Companies won't resurrect something without financial gain. It just won't happen. And when a series is dead for so long, it's just not certain. But all it takes is one game to stroke the flames, like Street Fighter 4, resurrecting the fighting game genre in the late 2000s after it was just fucking weird in the mids. That forced Mortal Kombat to get its shit together and brought fighting games to a whole new level. Sometimes you're resurrecting more than just a game. You're resurrecting a whole genre or concept, and that can lead to financial stability across all gaming.
Financial stability and a concept. That's it!
You guys are still milking that dead person trend? As your former head of R&D, I'll give you my research, but never my empathy.
Rex, is your cult real?
Yeah.
That'll do it!
My God, my eyelids work.
It's pretty stunning. I've only worked with someone who paid off their debts and bought a house unconsciously twice before.
Wait, what?
It's all over the news. 3 corpses were resurrected last night and they're still out there. Really impressive. Keep up the good work.
Well, I resurrected my financial stability, a dangerous serial killer, and some other person while failing to sell any ghosts. That's a net loss. Am I still my cell phoning a house? Well, let's call it New Locationer McGee. It's even more New Locationer than the last one. But hey, if gaming revivals have taught me anything, it's that the end is never really the end. I'll be back to financial ruin in no time. Should have put more of a budget into that whole cemetery thing then. In the meantime, I can get used to this. I've wanted more space ever since I bought my 3rd copy. Yeah, why would I ask for a new Star Fox game? I have 10 of them right here.